The Black Hawk helicopter dropped from the sky like a predator diving toward prey, its rotors shredding the silence outside Crown Meridian Hotel's grand entrance. Armed soldiers poured through the revolving doors, boots hammering across polished marble, while terrified guests scattered. The commanding officer's voice cut through the chaos. "We're looking for Master Sergeant Shadow Wolf." Vanessa Carter's blood turned to ice as she watched the janitor she'd just humiliated and fired, the exhausted father in a stained uniform clutching his final paycheck, stand perfectly still while rifles pointed at expensive chandeliers, and everyone realized the invisible man pushing a mop was something far more dangerous. If you want to see how this story unfolds, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. The fluorescent lights inside Crown Meridian Hotel's service corridor hummed with the particular frequency of expensive electricity powering a building where people paid $400 per night to sleep on Egyptian cotton. Ethan Brooks pushed his cleaning cart past storage closets and employee break rooms, the wheels squeaking against linoleum that never saw sunlight or guests. His navy blue janitor's uniform hung loose on his frame, not because it was the wrong size, but because he'd lost weight over the past 8 months. The kind of weight you lose when dinner becomes optional and sleep turns into something you negotiate with worry instead of rest. His hands, calloused and scarred in ways that didn't match his job description, gripped the mop handle with the same steady pressure he'd once used on entirely different equipment. At 32, Ethan looked older, not dramatically. He didn't have gray hair or deep wrinkles, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he'd already lived several lifetimes and hadn't enjoyed most of them. The walkie-talkie clipped to his belt crackled. "Brooks, we need the grand lobby cleaned before the 3 o'clock board meeting. Spill near the fountain." Ethan pressed the button. "Copy. On my way." He navigated the service corridors with the efficiency of someone who'd spent 2 years memorizing every shortcut, every hidden passage that kept the hotel's working class invisible to its wealthy clientele. The Crown Meridian prided itself on seamless luxury, which meant staff should appear only when needed and vanish the moment their task was complete, like stagehands in a theater where the curtain never fell. The grand lobby sprawled before him as he emerged from the service entrance behind a marble column. Afternoon sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the kind of wealth that made most people feel poor just by proximity. A fountain dominated the center of the space, water cascading over bronze sculptures while guests in business suits and designer dresses moved through the area with the confidence of people who'd never worried about rent. The spill was near the south side of the fountain, someone's overpriced coffee creating a beige puddle that threatened to stain the white marble. Ethan approached with his cart, already calculating the fastest cleaning method. The hotel used a specific Portuguese marble that required particular care. Most janitors would have just mopped it up with standard cleaner, but Ethan had researched the stone's composition, learned its weaknesses, developed his own solution that cleaned without damaging the calcium carbonate structure. He was crouched beside the spill, working methodically, when he heard the voices approaching. "I don't care what the contractor says, we're not paying for substandard work." Ethan didn't look up. He'd learned early that making eye contact with management was a mistake. They didn't want to see you. They wanted to see the results of your work after you disappeared back into whatever storage closet you'd emerged from. "Miss Carter, the marble restoration in the East Wing is actually exceeding industry standards." "Then industry standards are too low." The woman's voice carried the particular sharpness of someone who'd learned to speak in boardrooms where hesitation meant weakness. Ethan kept cleaning, using small circular motions that lifted the coffee without spreading it. His reflection in the wet marble showed a man who'd become very good at not being noticed. "What is he doing?" The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to drop. Ethan froze, his hand still on the mop. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter." The second voice belonged to Gerald Humphrey, the hotel's facilities manager. Nervous, already defensive. "That janitor. What cleaning solution is he using?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He straightened slowly, turned to face them. The woman was exactly what he'd expected from the voice. Sharp business suit, hair pulled back severe enough to give most people a headache, and eyes that evaluated everything like a spreadsheet requiring correction. Vanessa Carter, the hotel's 30-year-old CEO, who'd inherited the position from her late mother and ran the place with the warmth of an industrial freezer. Gerald glanced at Ethan's bucket. Standard marble cleaner, I assume. Brooks is one of our most reliable. That's not standard. Vanessa moved closer, her heels clicking against the floor with the rhythm of approaching artillery. That solution is too dark. What's in that bucket? Ethan met her gaze for exactly 1 second before dropping his eyes back to floor level. Diluted vinegar base with mineral oil and distilled water, ma'am. The standard cleaner the hotel provides leaves residue that attracts more dirt. This solution cleans without... You're using an unauthorized cleaning method on $60,000 imported marble? The lobby had gone quiet. Other guests had stopped moving. Staff members had materialized from doorways, drawn by the particular frequency of a public confrontation. Ethan felt the familiar weight settling onto his shoulders, the sensation of being watched, evaluated, found wanting by people who'd never bothered to understand the situation. Ma'am, the method I'm using is actually better for the marbles long term. I don't recall asking for your opinion on marble maintenance. Vanessa's voice could have cut glass. You're a janitor. You follow procedures. You don't improvise with the hotel's expensive property. Gerald cleared his throat. Ms. Carter, perhaps we could discuss this in private. No. She didn't even look at him. This is exactly the kind of entitled behavior that undermines operational standards. Employees who think they know better than management, who decide rules don't apply to them. Ethan's hands had gone very still. Not the stillness of fear, something else, something older. With respect, ma'am, I've been maintaining these floors for 2 years. The standard cleaner was damaging the marble. I researched... You researched. Vanessa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. How enterprising. Tell me, in your extensive research, did you discover the concept of authorization, or chain of command, or the fact that your job is to do what you're told, not to freelance as an amateur chemist? The words hit like physical blows. Ethan could feel every eye in the lobby on him, could see other staff members looking away, grateful it wasn't them, could hear Lily's voice in his head from this morning. Daddy, can we have pancakes for breakfast tomorrow? And his own response? Maybe, sweetheart. We'll see. Which was what he always said when he didn't have enough money. I'll switch back to the standard cleaner immediately, ma'am. No, you won't. Vanessa pulled her phone from her pocket. Because you're fired. Effective immediately. The lobby felt like it had dropped 10 degrees. Gerald's face went pale. Ms. Carter, that seems excessive for... Excessive? She finally turned to look at her facilities manager. An employee directly defying established protocols with hotel property isn't excessive. It's termination-worthy negligence. What if his homemade solution had damaged the marble? What if a guest had slipped on whatever chemicals he's using? This hotel's reputation is built on consistency and safety, not janitors playing scientist. Ethan stood perfectly still. There was a specific kind of humiliation that came from being destroyed in public. And the worst part was knowing that any response, any defense, would only make it worse. He'd learned that lesson in places where the stakes had been considerably higher than cleaning supplies. I need my final paycheck. His voice was quiet, steady. Vanessa frowned. You'll receive it according to standard payroll procedures, 2 weeks from... I need it today. That's not how payroll works. I'm aware. Ethan's hands were starting to shake, so he shoved them in his pockets. But I need it today. I have an expense that can't wait 2 weeks. Something flickered in Vanessa's expression. Maybe curiosity, maybe irritation at being questioned. What kind of expense? The entire lobby was listening. Dozens of strangers were about to hear about his daughter's medical bills, about the prescription that needed to be refilled by Friday, about the fact that he was $300 short and the pharmacy wouldn't extend credit anymore. A personal expense, ma'am. Then it can wait for standard payroll. Vanessa glanced at Gerald. Get him off the floor and make sure his badge is deactivated before he leaves the building. She turned to walk away. Ethan watched her go, watched the crowd part for her like water around a stone, watched her heels click against the marble he'd been trying to protect. Gerald approached, his expression somewhere between sympathy and relief that he wasn't the one being destroyed. Ethan, I'm sorry. I'll try to expedite the payroll, but it's fine. Ethan was already removing his employee badge, setting it on his cleaning cart. Thanks for hiring me in the first place. He walked toward the service entrance, past the whispering guests and the staff members who were suddenly very interested in their phones. The cart stayed behind. It belonged to the hotel. His uniform belonged to the hotel. Everything here belonged to someone else. The service corridor swallowed him. He moved through the familiar passages one final time, past the break room where he'd eaten lunch alone for 2 years, past the time clock where he'd never been late once, past the locker where he'd kept a photo of Lily taped inside the door. He changed into his street clothes, jeans and a faded gray t-shirt that had been washed so many times the original color was a guess. The locker room was empty. Everyone else was still working. His phone buzzed. A text from Lily's school. "Mr. Brooks?" Lily asked if she could stay for the after-school art program today. "No charge. Teachers hosting for kids who want extra time. Okay if she stays until 5? Relief and guilt hit simultaneously. Relief because he'd have time to figure out the paycheck situation without her watching him panic. Guilt because Lily never asked to stay late for anything. She knew money was tight, and extra time meant extra complications. He texted back, "Yes, thank you." Another message appeared, this one from Dr. Reyna's office. "Reminder, Lily's prescription needs to be refilled by Friday. Please confirm pickup time." Ethan closed his eyes, leaned his forehead against the locker door. The medication cost $340. His final check would have been $485. After rent, utilities, and groceries, he'd have exactly enough. In 2 weeks, that math would be completely different. He left through the employee entrance, emerging into the parking lot where staff vehicles sat in neat rows under the afternoon sun. His car was a 15-year-old sedan that had blown through Reliable about 40,000 miles ago and was now operating on hope and mechanical spite. The passenger side mirror was held on with duct tape. The check engine light had been on so long he'd stopped seeing it. He sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine, staring at the hotel's rear entrance. Through the windows, he could see the kitchen staff moving around, prepping for the dinner service. Normal people doing normal jobs, going home to normal problems that didn't involve explaining to an 8-year-old why her medicine might be delayed. His phone buzzed again. He almost ignored it, then saw the caller ID, Colonel Kane. Ethan stared at the name for 3 full seconds before rejecting the call. She'd been trying to reach him for 6 months. He'd been ignoring her for 6 months. Whatever she wanted, whatever they all wanted, the answer was the same as it had been when he'd walked away from that life. No. The phone immediately buzzed again. Same caller. Ethan answered this time, pressing the phone to his ear without saying anything. "Ethan." Colonel Rebecca Kane's voice hadn't changed, still carrying the authority of someone who expected orders to be followed. "Don't hang up. I'm hanging up. We need you." "No." "Ethan, I said no." His hand was gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make the old leather creak. "I'm done. I've been done. Whatever problem you're calling about, find someone else." "There is no one else. Not for this." "Then you're screwed." He started to pull the phone away from his ear. "It's children, Ethan." His hand froze. Kane let the silence stretch for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to know she'd hit the target. "American civilians taken hostage, families. 3 of the hostages are under 10 years old. We've got limited time and no good options." Ethan closed his eyes. "Call Jenkins, call Martinez, call any of the 50 other operators who are still active. We've run 17 different scenarios. None of them work without significant civilian casualties. We need someone who thinks differently, someone who sees angles other people miss. Find someone else." "Ethan, listen to me." He hung up, sat in the silence of his dying car while the afternoon sun baked the parking lot, and his daughter was in art class making something cheerful, and his bank account mocked him, and Colonel Rebecca Kane knew exactly which words to use to carve open old wounds. 3 of the hostages are under 10 years old. "Not my problem," he said out loud to the empty car, to no one. Not anymore. His phone didn't ring again. Kane was smarter than that. She'd given him the information. Now she'd wait for it to eat at him. Wait for him to remember what it felt like to have the skills to save people, and the choice to do nothing. He started the car. It coughed twice before the engine caught. He needed to pick up Lily in 2 hours. Before that, he needed to figure out how to ask a pharmacy for a 2-week extension on medication that a blood disorder didn't care about your financial problems. The drive home took 15 minutes through streets that got progressively less expensive. The apartment complex where he and Lily lived was the kind of place that offered newly renovated units that meant the landlord had painted over mold and called it progress. But it was clean, relatively safe, and exactly what he could afford on a janitor's salary. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Crown Meridian Hotel, Grand Lobby, 6 p.m. Come see something interesting. RK. Ethan deleted the message without responding. He spent the next 90 minutes on the phone with the pharmacy, the insurance company, and finally Dr. Reyna's office, trying to construct a solution from pieces that didn't fit together. The pharmacy couldn't extend credit. The insurance wouldn't process early refills. The doctor's office could provide a week's worth of samples, but after that, Lily would need the prescription. By the time he pulled up to Lily's school, he'd accomplished nothing except generating a stress headache that felt like someone was using his skull for percussion practice. Lily emerged from the building clutching a folder full of artwork, her backpack bouncing with each step. She was small for 8, the blood disorder stunted growth, but she moved with the particular energy of kids who hadn't learned that the world was designed to grind you down. "Daddy!" She yanked open the passenger door and climbed in, already talking. "I made a painting of the ocean, even though I've never seen the ocean except in pictures. But Mrs. Henderson said imagination is more important than accuracy, which I think means it's okay if my whale is the wrong size, because honestly, who knows how big whales really are compared to boats?" Ethan pulled away from the curb, smiling despite everything. "Sounds like Mrs. Henderson is a good teacher." "She is. She also said I have natural talent, which probably just means I stayed inside the lines better than Tommy Bradshaw, who basically just stabbed his paper with markers until it looked like a crime scene." Lily pulled out her paintings, shuffling through them. "This one's my favorite. It's supposed to be you and me at the beach." The painting showed 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, standing on yellow sand under a blue sky. The ocean was a series of wavy lines. The sun was a yellow circle with rays shooting out like spokes on a wheel. It was the kind of artwork that appeared flawless to parents and adequate to everyone else. "It's perfect," Ethan said quietly. "We should go to the beach sometime, like in the summer." "Can we?" The beach was an 8-hour drive. Gas, food, hotel, even a cheap trip would cost $600 minimum. "Maybe, sweetheart. We'll see." Lily's smile dimmed slightly. She was getting old enough to understand that "we'll see" meant "no, but I don't want to disappoint you." She tucked the painting back into her folder without comment. They drove in silence for a few blocks. Ethan gripped the steering wheel and tried not to calculate how many beach trips he could have afforded if Vanessa Carter hadn't destroyed his income 3 hours ago. "Daddy, are you okay?" He glanced at her. "Yeah, just a long day." "Did something happen at work?" Kids were perceptive in ways that made lying difficult. "I'm switching jobs. Nothing bad. Just time for a change." "Are we moving?" "No. Same apartment. Same school for you." "Okay." Lily pulled her backpack onto her lap, hugging it. "Because I like my school, and Mrs. Henderson said I could be in the advanced art class next year if I keep improving." "Then you'll keep improving." They reached the apartment complex. Ethan parked in his assigned space, number 43, right under a tree that dropped sap on his windshield with impressive consistency. Lily grabbed her backpack and folder, already moving toward the stairs. The apartment was on the 2nd floor, facing the parking lot. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that was technically part of the living room. Lily's room had her bed, her dresser, and her desk. Ethan slept on the couch and kept his clothes in garbage bags in the closet. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Lily dumped her backpack by the door and headed straight for the small TV in the living room. "Can I watch cartoons before dinner?" 30 minutes, then homework." "I don't have homework. Mrs. Henderson said creativity can't be rushed." "Then 30 minutes of cartoons, then 30 minutes of reading. That's basically homework. That's basically how you get smart enough to have choices later." Lily flopped onto the couch with the dramatic sigh of someone deeply oppressed, but she was smiling. Ethan moved to the kitchen, opening the refrigerator to assess dinner options. Eggs, cheese, bread. He could make grilled cheese sandwiches and scrambled eggs. Not exciting, but nutritious enough.
His phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number, 6 p.m. You'll want to see this. Ethan deleted it again. He made dinner while Lily watched cartoons, the apartment filling with the sounds of animated characters solving problems in 22 minutes. By the time he'd plated the food, he'd almost managed to push Colonel Kane's voice out of his head. 3 of the hostages are under 10 years old. Dinner's ready. Lily appeared immediately, climbing onto one of the 2 chairs at their small table. She picked up her fork, examining the grilled cheese like it might contain secret ingredients. Did you remember to— I didn't burn it this time, Ethan interrupted. Promise.
They ate in comfortable silence. Lily told him about art class, about Tommy Bradshaw's marker crime scene, about how her friend Sophia had a new puppy, and could they maybe get a puppy too? Maybe when we have a bigger place, Ethan said. Puppies need space. Or a cat. Cats are smaller. Cats need space too. Or a fish. Fish are tiny. We'll see. Lily grinned. That means no. That means we'll see. After dinner, Lily did her reading, a book about a girl detective solving mysteries in her neighborhood, while Ethan cleaned up. The apartment's walls were thin enough that he could hear the neighbor's TV through the ceiling, the couple downstairs arguing about someone named Derek, who apparently couldn't be trusted with simple tasks. By 8 o'clock, Lily was yawning. Ethan supervised teeth brushing, tucked her into bed, and sat on the edge of her mattress while she pulled her blanket up to her chin. Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be an artist.
You'd be a great artist. Or maybe a doctor. Mrs. Henderson said artists don't always make money, but doctors definitely do. You can be whatever you want. That's what everyone says, but I don't think it's true. I think you can be whatever you work hard enough to become, but some things are harder than others. She yawned again. Like being an astronaut is probably really hard. Probably. But being an artist seems fun, even if it doesn't make money. Her eyes were already closing. We'd figure it out, right? Ethan smoothed her hair back from her forehead. Right. She was asleep in under a minute. He sat there for a while longer, watching her breathe, trying not to think about prescription costs or lost jobs, or the fact that his 8-year-old daughter was already learning to limit her dreams based on financial reality. Finally, he stood, turned off her light, and closed the door halfway. The living room felt too quiet. He sat on the couch, staring at his phone.
5:47 p.m. Crown Meridian Hotel, Grand Lobby, 6 p.m. He had no reason to go. Whatever Kane wanted to show him, it was a manipulation tactic designed to pull him back into a life he'd deliberately left behind. She knew he couldn't resist a puzzle, knew he'd spent years training to see problems and solve them, knew that telling him something interesting was happening was the equivalent of dangling bait. He wasn't going. He stood up, grabbed his car keys, and left. The drive back to Crown Meridian took 12 minutes. He parked in the guest lot this time. His employee badge had been deactivated, and the staff entrance would have rejected him like the system purging a virus. The sun was setting, painting the hotel's glass exterior in shades of orange and gold. Ethan walked through the main entrance. The doorman didn't recognize him without his janitor's uniform. Inside, the lobby looked exactly as it had 4 hours ago, minus the coffee spill he'd been cleaning when his life had imploded. Colonel Rebecca Kane stood near the fountain, wearing civilian clothes, jeans and a leather jacket that somehow didn't make her look any less military. She was 43 with short dark hair going gray at the temples and the particular posture of someone who'd spent decades being obeyed without question. She saw him immediately. "You came." "I'm leaving." "Not yet." She nodded toward the far end of the lobby. "Watch." Ethan followed her gaze. At first, he didn't see anything unusual, just the normal flow of guests checking in, staff moving through their routines, the evening shift settling into rhythm. Then he heard it. The sound of rotor blades cutting through air, growing louder, getting closer. Every head in the lobby turned toward the windows as a Black Hawk helicopter dropped from the sky like a raptor diving toward prey, its rotors shredding the evening quiet. It touched down in the circular drive outside the main entrance, an absolutely insane place to land a military helicopter. And before Ethan could process what he was seeing, armed soldiers were pouring through the doors. 6 of them. Full combat gear, rifles held ready but not quite aimed. They moved with the synchronized efficiency of a unit that had trained together extensively. The lobby erupted into chaos. Guests screamed, scrambled backward, some dropping to the floor. Staff members froze or ran depending on their proximity to exits. The soldiers spread out, covering angles, and the officer leading them scanned the crowd with sharp precision. "We're looking for Master Sergeant Shadow Wolf," the officer announced, his voice cutting through the panic. "Stand down. This is a federal operation." Ethan's entire body had gone cold. That name, Shadow Wolf, was something he hadn't heard out loud in 3 years. It belonged to someone else. Someone he'd buried under janitor shifts and medical bills in deliberate obscurity. He turned to Kane. "What the hell are you doing?" "Making a point." She wasn't smiling. "They need you, Ethan, and after what happened here today, you need them." Across the lobby, Vanessa Carter had emerged from wherever she'd been. She stood near the concierge desk, her expression cycling through confusion, anger, and something that looked like dawning horror as the soldiers continued their search. The officer's eyes landed on Ethan. Recognition flickered. "Master Sergeant Brooks?" Ethan didn't move. Every instinct he'd developed during years of combat operations was screaming at him to assess, react, control the situation. But those instincts belonged to someone else. Someone who didn't have a daughter at home waiting for her father to come back from the grocery store. "Stand down," he said quietly. "This is civilian space." "Sir, we have orders." "Then your orders are putting civilians at risk. Stand down." The officer hesitated, then lowered his rifle slightly. The rest of his unit followed suit. The lobby remained frozen, dozens of people trying to understand what they were witnessing. Vanessa Carter moved forward, her shock crystallizing into fury. "What is happening in my hotel? Who authorized a military operation?" She stopped mid-sentence as her eyes landed on Ethan. "You?" He met her gaze, saw the exact moment she connected the janitor she'd destroyed with the man soldiers were calling Master Sergeant. Saw her confidence fracture into something closer to disbelief. Kane stepped forward, pulling out federal identification. "Colonel Rebecca Kane, U.S. Special Operations Command. This operation was authorized at the federal level. Your cooperation is appreciated." "Cooperation?" Vanessa's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "You land a military helicopter outside my hotel, storm through my lobby with armed soldiers, and expect cooperation? We're locating a critical asset for a time-sensitive mission. By terrorizing my guests? By doing whatever's necessary." Kane's expression didn't change. "Master Sergeant Brooks possesses specialized skills required for an active operation. We need him to consult." Vanessa's eyes cut back to Ethan. "The janitor? You're telling me the janitor I fired this afternoon is some kind of military operative?" "Not some kind," Kane said. "One of the best reconnaissance specialists we've ever trained. Multiple decorated missions. Saved 17 lives during the Kandahar extraction. Led the tactical planning for—" "Stop." Ethan's voice was flat. "This isn't necessary." "It absolutely is." Kane turned to face the crowd, raising her voice. "Master Sergeant Ethan Brooks served this country with distinction for 9 years. He's earned every medal we have. And right now, American civilians, including children, are in danger overseas. We need his help." The lobby had gone completely silent. Every eye was on Ethan. The invisible janitor suddenly visible in ways that made his skin crawl. Vanessa looked like she'd been struck. You served?" "I mopped floors," Ethan said quietly. "That's all that matters." "That's not—" She stopped, seemed to realize she was standing in front of a crowd, lowered her voice. "You never mentioned military service. You never asked." The words hung between them like an accusation. Vanessa's face flushed. Around them, guests were pulling out phones, recording everything. This would be on social media in minutes. The hotel's reputation, her reputation, was being dismantled in real time. Kane gestured toward the entrance. "Master Sergeant, we have a briefing waiting. Time is critical." Ethan looked at the helicopter, at the soldiers, at Vanessa Carter, who was staring at him like he'd transformed into someone unrecognizable, at Colonel Kane, who'd orchestrated this entire spectacle, knowing exactly how he'd react. "I have a daughter at home," he said. "I don't do this anymore." "I know." Kane's expression softened slightly. But those hostages have parents too. And right now, you're the only person who might see something we've missed. Find someone else. There is no one else. Not with your skill set. Ethan felt the weight of every stare pressing down on him. Felt the old life reaching up from where he'd buried it, trying to drag him back under. Felt Lily's voice in his head. Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be an artist. He turned toward the exit. Just look at the mission plan, Kane called after him. That's all I'm asking. Look at it. Tell us if you see anything we missed, then go home to your daughter. 2 hours. That's it. Ethan stopped walking. 3 of the hostages are under 10 years old. He turned back slowly, met Kane's eyes, saw something there that looked almost like sympathy. 2 hours, he said. Then I'm done. Kane nodded. 2 hours. Ethan walked toward the helicopter, past the gaping crowd, past Vanessa Carter, who looked like her entire understanding of reality had just been rewritten. The soldiers fell into formation around him, not threatening, but protective, like he was valuable, like he mattered. He climbed into the Blackhawk, the rotors already spinning up. Through the window, he could see the hotel lobby, all those faces staring up at the helicopter like they'd just witnessed something impossible. The janitor who'd cleaned their floors, the invisible man who pushed a mop, the father who just wanted to get home before dinner, rising into the sky like he'd never left at all. The helicopter banked east, leaving the hotel shrinking behind them like a toy model someone had built to practice humiliation. Ethan sat strapped into the jump seat, his hands resting on his knees with the forced stillness of someone who'd learned that movement drew attention. The soldier sitting across from him kept glancing over, not quite staring, but clearly reassessing the man they'd been sent to retrieve. Kane sat beside him, headset on, speaking into the mic with someone at whatever command center was running this operation. Ethan couldn't hear the conversation over the rotor noise, but he recognized the body language, clipped responses, tactical confirmations, the particular efficiency of military communication where every word carried weight. They landed 18 minutes later on the roof of a federal building downtown. The kind of structure that looked boring from street level, gray concrete, minimal windows, the architectural equivalent of a file cabinet. But Ethan had been in enough of these places to know that boring exteriors usually meant interesting interiors. The roof access led to an elevator that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan. Kane pressed her thumb to the reader, and the doors slid open with the hydraulic whisper of expensive security. They descended in silence, the soldiers arranging themselves around Ethan in a formation that was technically protective but felt uncomfortably close to containment. The elevator stopped at a sublevel marked only with the letter C. The doors opened onto a hallway that belonged in a different building. Polished floors, recessed lighting, the kind of space where classified decisions got made by people whose names never appeared in newspapers. Kane led them to a conference room at the end of the hall. Inside, 3 people were already waiting around a table covered in tablets, printed satellite imagery, and enough coffee cups to suggest they'd been working for hours. 2 men in military dress uniforms, 1 woman in a gray suit that screamed federal intelligence. They all looked up when Ethan entered, and he saw the same expression flicker across their faces, skepticism, trying to hide behind professional courtesy. Gentlemen, Agent Moreno, this is Master Sergeant Ethan Brooks, Kane said, gesturing toward him like she was presenting evidence. Shadow Wolf. The older of the 2 officers stood, extending his hand. Major General William Cross. Appreciate you coming in, Sergeant. Ethan shook his hand, noting the grip. Firm, but not aggressive. Testing without being obvious. I'm here for 2 hours. Then I'm going home. Understood. Cross gestured to the table. Let's not waste time. What we're about to show you is classified at the highest level. Everything you see stays in this room. I haven't agreed to anything. You agreed to look, so look. The woman in the gray suit tapped her tablet, and the lights dimmed. A projection appeared on the far wall, satellite imagery of a compound somewhere that looked hot, dusty, and extremely far from anything resembling civilization. The image quality was sharp enough to count windows. This is a former agricultural facility approximately 40 kilometers outside Kandahar province, the woman said, her voice carrying the flat precision of someone who briefed people for a living. Currently occupied by a splinter militant group calling themselves the Red Crescent Brigade. 3 days ago, they took 14 American civilians hostage during an aid convoy ambush. The image shifted, showing grainy footage of vehicles being forced off a road. Ethan watched people being pulled from trucks, hands zip-tied, pushed toward waiting transport. The video quality was poor, but he could see the fear clearly enough. The hostages include aid workers, medical personnel, and 3 family members of embassy staff, the woman continued. Among them are 3 children, ages 6, 8, and 9. The brigade is demanding prisoner releases we can't authorize and a ransom we won't pay. They've given us 96 hours before they start executing hostages. We're now at hour 72. The projection changed again, showing thermal imaging of the compound's interior. Heat signatures clustered in what looked like a central building. Ethan counted them automatically. 14 brighter signatures that had to be the hostages, approximately 25 dimmer ones spread throughout the compound that meant guards. We've run every extraction scenario we have, Cross said, stepping forward to point at the projection. Direct assault, perimeter breach, aerial insertion. Every model shows unacceptable civilian casualties. The compound's layout funnels any approach through kill zones. They've got interlocking fields of fire, elevated positions, and the hostages are being held in a central room with limited access points. So, you want me to find a magical solution your analysts missed? Ethan said quietly. We want you to look at the problem from a different angle. Ethan studied the thermal imaging, his mind already shifting into patterns he'd spent 3 years trying to forget. The compound's layout was brutal. Whoever had fortified it understood defensive architecture, but defensive architecture always had assumptions built in, assumptions about how attackers would think. Show me the building schematics. The woman tapped her tablet again. Architectural drawings appeared, overlaying the satellite imagery. The compound had been built as a processing facility, multiple buildings connected by covered walkways, a central warehouse space, administrative offices along the perimeter. The hostages are here, Cross pointed to the central warehouse. Ground floor, no windows, single entrance accessible only through this corridor, guards stationed at both ends plus roving patrols. Water supply? The question hung in the air for a moment. Cross frowned. What? Water supply. Agricultural facility this size would have needed irrigation systems. Where's the water coming from? The woman pulled up different schematics, these ones showing utility infrastructure. Underground well system feeding into storage tanks. The tanks are here, northwest corner of the compound. Ethan leaned closer, tracing the pipe networks with his eyes. And these pipes run under the entire facility? According to the original plans, yes, but those tunnels are too small for personnel. Not personnel, equipment. Ethan straightened, his mind building the approach in 3-dimensional space. You've been thinking about this like an assault, door breach, room clearing, overwhelming force. But that's exactly what they're expecting. Every defensive position is designed around that assumption. So what's your alternative? The second officer spoke for the first time, his skepticism barely concealed. We politely ask them to surrender? No, you make them think they're winning. Ethan pointed to the water tanks. Cut their water supply here, wait 6 hours. They'll send people to investigate. Standard maintenance response. When they open the access hatch, that's your entry point. Small team, 4 operators maximum, moving through the maintenance tunnels. Meanwhile, you stage what looks like a standard assault on the east perimeter. Loud, obvious, exactly what their defensive positions are designed to counter. Cross was already shaking his head. The maintenance tunnels don't connect to the hostage location. They connect to the electrical systems, which run through the ceiling of the hostage room. Ethan traced the path on the schematic. You come through the ceiling. They're watching the door because that's where attacks come from. Nobody watches the ceiling. The room had gone very quiet. The woman was typing rapidly on her tablet, running calculations. Cross and the other officer were studying the schematics with expressions that had shifted from skepticism towards something that looked uncomfortably close to hope. The ceiling approach puts operators directly above hostages with minimal cover, the second officer said. One mistake and we're firing down into civilians. So don't make a mistake, Ethan met his eyes. Use non-lethal incapacitants first. Flashbangs through the electrical access. Gas if you have it. 30 seconds of chaos while the guards are blind and choking. Rappel down, neutralize threats, extract through the same route. The assault team on the east perimeter pulls back once the hostages are clear. That's... The woman looked up from her tablet. That's actually viable. The timing would be tight, but the model shows a 73% success probability with minimal civilian risk. That's better than anything we've generated. Cross was staring at Ethan with an expression that mixed respect and something else. Maybe regret. This is why we needed you. This kind of lateral thinking is what made Shadow Wolf legendary. I'm not Shadow Wolf anymore. Ethan stepped back from the table. I looked at your problem. I gave you a solution. We're done. Kane moved to block his path to the door. Ethan, we need you on this operation. No, you don't. You've got dozens of operators who can execute what I just described. But if something goes wrong, then they adapt. That's what training is for. He could feel the old instincts trying to pull him back in, the part of his brain that still thought in terms of tactical problems and optimal solutions. I came here because you said 2 hours. It's been 45 minutes. I'm leaving. Cross cleared his throat. Sergeant Brooks, I understand your position. But those children have parents who want them home safe. I get it. That's exactly why I can't be part of this. Ethan's voice had gone flat. Because I have a daughter at home who needs her father. And every time I've told myself just one more mission, I've gotten deeper into something I can't escape. So no, find someone else. He walked past Kane, out of the conference room, back down the hallway toward the elevator. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline dumping into his system the way it always did when he made decisions that felt like jumping off cliffs. Kane caught up with him at the elevator. Ethan, wait. I'm done waiting. I've been waiting 3 years for you people to accept that I'm out. We accept it. This isn't about dragging you back into service. This is about using your skills for one specific situation where lives are at stake. Lives are always at stake. The elevator doors opened. Ethan stepped inside. That's not my problem anymore. Kane followed him in, jabbing the button for the ground floor. What about Lily? Ethan's entire body went rigid. Don't. What do you think she'd say if she knew you could help save 3 kids and you walked away? She'd say her father kept his promise to come home. The elevator was rising, floor numbers ticking upward. That's all that matters. Is it? Kane's voice had softened. Because from where I'm standing, you're teaching her that when things get hard, you quit. That when people need help, you turn away. Is that really the lesson you want her to learn? The elevator reached the ground floor. Ethan stepped out into a lobby that looked like every other government building. Security desk, metal detectors, bored guards who barely glanced up from their monitors. You want to talk about lessons? Ethan turned to face Kane, his voice low enough that the guards couldn't hear. Here's what I learned. Every mission I completed successfully got people killed. Different people, different places, but always someone dying because I was good at my job. And eventually I looked at my daughter and realized that being good at killing isn't something I want to teach her to value. You weren't good at killing, you were good at saving people. By killing other people. That's how it works. Kane studied him for a long moment. What happened to you, Ethan? Not in combat. I know your record. What happened after? The lobby's fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside, through the glass doors, Ethan could see normal people walking past on normal sidewalks, living normal lives that didn't involve classified briefings about hostage extractions. My wife died, he said quietly. Brain aneurysm. No warning, no symptoms, just gone. I was overseas when it happened. Took me 48 hours to get back. By the time I got home, Lily had been staying with neighbors who barely knew her, crying herself to sleep in a stranger's house while her father was on the other side of the world being a hero. Kane's expression shifted. I didn't know. Nobody knew, because I didn't talk about it. I just requested immediate discharge, packed up our life, and moved somewhere nobody would recognize me. Started over as someone whose absence wouldn't matter. He pushed open the glass doors, stepping out into the evening air. And that's where I'm staying. The street was busy with evening foot traffic. Ethan started walking, not toward the metro station or a taxi stand,
just away from the building and everything it represented. Kane kept pace beside him. "The hotel," she said after a block. "That scene in the lobby wasn't just about recruiting you, was it? You mean the part where you humiliated me in front of everyone who just watched me get fired? I mean the part where we showed Vanessa Carter exactly who she destroyed." Ethan didn't respond. He'd been trying not to think about Vanessa's face when the soldiers had called him Master Sergeant. The way her certainty had cracked into something closer to horror. "She needs to know," Kane continued. "People like her spend their lives judging people like you without ever understanding what they're looking at. Sometimes they need the lesson." "I don't care about teaching her anything. I care about paying my daughter's medical bills." "Which you can't do now that you're unemployed." Ethan stopped walking. "Was that you too? Did you orchestrate me getting fired so I'd be desperate enough to take whatever offer you made?" "No." Kane met his eyes. "That was just Carter being exactly who she is. But I'm not above using it as leverage.
The military pays better than janitor work, and your daughter needs treatment you can't afford. So this is blackmail. This is reality. You have skills people need. You have expenses those skills can cover. Pretending you're just a janitor doesn't make it true." Ethan started walking again, faster this time. "I'm going home." "Fine. Go home. Tuck Lily in, read her a bedtime story, try not to think about 3 other kids who won't see their parents again because you decided your comfort was more important than their lives." He spun around, the anger finally breaking through. "You want me to feel guilty? Fine. I feel guilty. I've felt guilty for 3 years. Guilty that I survived when better soldiers didn't. Guilty that I chose my daughter over my duty. Guilty that I'm not whatever hero you remember. But guilt doesn't change the math. If I go back, I'm gambling with Lily's future, and I'm not willing to lose that bet." Kane stepped closer, her voice dropping to something that sounded almost gentle. "Ethan, I'm not asking you to rejoin. I'm asking you to consult. You gave us a strategy. That's valuable. Now we need someone with your experience to help refine the execution plan. Ground-level details, timing sequences, contingency protocols, things analysts miss because they've never actually run an operation. Hire someone who's still active. We have. They're good. But you're better, and we both know it." The street noise surrounded them. Cars honking, people talking, someone's music bleeding from apartment windows. Normal city sounds that felt like they belonged to a different universe than the one Kane was trying to drag him back into. "How long?" Ethan asked finally. 72 hours. 3 days of mission planning and oversight. After that, the operation runs with or without you, and you walk away with a consultant fee that covers your daughter's treatment for the next year." "I don't want your money." "Yes, you do. You just don't want to admit it." Kane pulled out her phone, typed something, then showed him the screen. It displayed a number with enough zeros that Ethan's throat tightened. "That's not consultant pay. That's guilt money. That's what your expertise is worth. Take it or don't, but stop pretending you don't need it." Ethan stared at the number. Did the math. Lily's medication for a year. Rent paid through next summer. Maybe even enough left over for things like new clothes, school supplies, the art classes she'd mentioned wanting to try. 72 hours, he said. "Then I'm done." 72 hours, Kane agreed. They walked back to the federal building in silence. The elevator took them back down to sub-level C, where the conference room was exactly as they'd left it. 3 people still studying schematics, trying to transform Ethan's strategy into executable reality. Cross looked up when they entered. "Sergeant Brooks, glad you came back." "I didn't come back. I'm consulting. 3 days, then I'm gone." "Understood." Cross gestured to the table. "We've been refining your ceiling approach. The maintenance tunnel access requires precise timing, 6 operators moving in total darkness through spaces that weren't designed for human traffic." Ethan moved to the table, studying the updated schematics. Someone had overlaid tactical movement patterns onto the building plans, but the spacing was wrong. "These intervals won't work. You're treating the tunnels like corridors, but they're utility access. There'll be pipes, junction boxes, structural supports. Your operators will be crawling, not walking." The second officer frowned. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been in 100 buildings like this. Agricultural facilities all use similar infrastructure." Ethan pulled up a different view on the tablet, zooming into the tunnel systems. See these notations? Electrical conduit, water mains, ventilation ducts. Your team will be navigating around all of it in maybe 30 inches of clearance. Standard tactical spacing doesn't apply. For the next 4 hours, Ethan broke down every element of the operation with a precision that felt like putting on old clothes that didn't quite fit anymore. He walked them through entry sequences, timing windows, contingency protocols for when things went wrong. He identified weaknesses in their approach, assumptions about guard rotations, insufficient planning for civilian panic response, electrical systems that would fail in ways that created unexpected hazards. The others took notes, asked questions, gradually shifted from skepticism to something closer to trust. Even the second officer, who'd clearly entered the room convinced this was a waste of time, eventually started nodding along. By midnight, they had an execution plan that looked viable. Not perfect, nothing involving hostage rescue was ever perfect, but substantially better than what they'd started with. Cross leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "This is solid work, Sergeant. I think we've got something that might actually succeed." "Might isn't good enough," Ethan said. "You need to run full simulations with actual operators, environmental variables, equipment failure scenarios, medical response protocols. You're planning for success, but you need to plan for everything that can go wrong. We've got 24 hours before the operation window closes. That's not enough time for full simulations. Then delay the operation. Can't. The hostage deadline is absolute." Cross stood, stretching. "We'll brief the tactical team at 0600, run what simulations we can, and execute 36 hours from now. That's the timeline." Ethan felt the familiar weight settling onto his shoulders, the knowledge that people were going to implement his strategy, and if it failed, he'd carry that weight forever. "I need to go home. Check on my daughter." "Understood. Kane will drive you." In the elevator going up, Kane glanced at him. "You did good work tonight. I gave you a plan that might get people killed. Or might save them. That's how this works." They emerged into the building's lobby. Outside, the city had shifted into its late-night mode. Fewer pedestrians, more shadows. The particular quiet that came when regular people were sleeping and only insomniacs and third-shift workers were still moving around. Kane's car was parked in a reserve space around back, a black SUV with government plates and windows tinted dark enough to violate civilian regulations. She drove like someone who'd spent time in motorcades, smooth, efficient, constantly checking mirrors. "You know, Vanessa Carter is probably going to fire you again," Kane said after a few blocks. "I already got fired once today. What's she going to do? Super fire me?" "She's going to want answers about who you are, why you were working as a janitor, what happened in that conference room tonight. Then she'll be disappointed. I don't owe her my history." "Maybe not. But that stunt in the lobby painted a target on both of you. Social media is already full of videos. Secret soldier works as janitor. CEO fires military hero. It's getting picked up by news outlets." Ethan closed his eyes. "Great. That's exactly what I need. It's leverage you can use. Carter's reputation is taking hits she can't afford. The board is going to ask questions. She'll need you to control the narrative." "I don't want to control anything. I want to go home, make sure my daughter's okay, and try to forget this entire day happened." They drove through neighborhoods that got progressively less expensive, the buildings shorter and older, the streets narrower. Kane pulled up outside Ethan's apartment complex and put the car in park. "Tomorrow morning, 0600, back at the Federal Building," she said. "We'll run through the tactical briefing with the operators. Your insights will be critical." "I'll be there." Ethan opened the door, then paused. "Kane, those 3 kids, do we actually have a good chance of getting them out?" "With your plan? Yeah, I think we do." He nodded slowly. "Then I guess it's worth 3 days." The apartment was dark when he entered. Lily's door was closed, soft breathing audible from inside. Ethan checked his phone, 12:47 a.m. He told her he was going to the grocery store. That had been 7 hours ago. He should sleep. Tomorrow was going to be brutal. Tactical briefings, simulation runs, the grinding stress of planning an operation where any mistake would echo through his conscience forever. Instead, he sat on the couch and pulled out his phone, scrolling through the news sites Kane had mentioned. She hadn't been exaggerating. The hotel footage was everywhere, Shaky cell phone videos of soldiers storming through the lobby, of Vanessa Carter's face when she'd realized the janitor was a decorated veteran, of Ethan walking toward the helicopter like he'd stepped out of someone else's life. The comment sections were predictably divided. Half the people called him a hero. The other half questioned why a veteran was working as a janitor. Nobody seemed to understand that both things could be true simultaneously. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, my office, 10 a.m. V. Carter." Ethan stared at the message, considered ignoring it. But Kane's words echoed in his head. Carter's reputation was damaged, and she'd want to control the narrative, which meant she'd want his cooperation, which meant he had leverage for the first time since she'd fired him. He texted back, "Can't tomorrow, Friday, 2 p.m. The response came almost immediately. "This isn't a request. Then it's a good thing I don't work for you anymore." He turned off his phone before she could respond, stretched out on the couch, and tried to sleep. His mind kept running through tactical scenarios, insertion angles, timing sequences, contingency protocols. The old patterns were still there, buried under 3 years of determined obscurity, but not forgotten. Never forgotten. Lily's door opened around 2 a.m. She shuffled out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy? When did you get home?" "A while ago, sweetheart. Everything's okay. You were gone a long time for groceries." "I know. I'm sorry. Something came up." She climbed onto the couch beside him, curling against his side with the automatic trust of someone who'd never had reason to doubt he'd protect her. "Are we in trouble?" "No." "Why would you think that?" "Because you have your worried face, the one where you're thinking about stuff you don't want to tell me." Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I'm working on a project. It's going to keep me busy for a few days, but everything's fine." "What kind of project?" "The boring kind. Lots of planning and meetings." "That does sound boring." Lily yawned. "Can we still have pancakes on Friday?" "Definitely." "Even if the project isn't done?" "Even then." She was asleep again in minutes. Ethan sat there holding her, watching the shadows shift across the ceiling, trying not to calculate the odds of the operation succeeding or the cost of it failing, trying not to think about 3 other children who were probably terrified right now, waiting for adults to save them, trying not to acknowledge that he'd already made the decision to see this through, regardless of what it cost him. The sun rose slowly, painting the apartment in shades of gray that gradually brightened toward something that might pass for hope. Ethan untangled himself from Lily, carried her back to her room, tucked her in properly. She didn't wake up. He made coffee, checked his phone, found 17 missed calls and 34 text messages. Most of them were from numbers he didn't recognize, probably journalists who'd gotten his information somehow. One was from Kane, reminding him about the 6 a.m. briefing. One was from Dr. Reyna's office, asking about the prescription refill. And one was from Vanessa Carter, Friday, 2 p.m. "Don't make me regret giving you another chance." Ethan almost laughed. She thought she was giving him a chance, like he needed her permission to exist. He texted back, "See you then." At 5:30 a.m., he left a note for Lily on the kitchen counter. Had to leave early for work. "Mrs. Chen downstairs will take you to school. Love you." And headed out to meet Kane. The federal building looked different in early morning light, less imposing and more tired. Kane was waiting in the lobby with coffee and what looked like resignation. "You look like hell," she said by way of greeting. "Didn't sleep much." "Yeah, well, join the club." She handed him the coffee. "The tactical team is already in the conference room. They've been briefed on your strategy, but they've got questions. Lots of questions." "That's fine. Questions are good." They took the elevator down to sublevel C. The conference room had been transformed overnight. Now it held 12 additional people, all of them wearing the particular bearing of soldiers who'd seen actual combat. Maps covered every wall. Tablets and laptops crowded the table. Someone had set up a 3-dimensional model of the compound using foam blocks and markers. Cross stood at the head of the table. "Master Sergeant Brooks, thanks for joining us. These are the operators who'll be executing your plan. They'd like to walk through some specifics." For the next 3 hours, Ethan answered questions that ranged from tactical minutiae to philosophical challenges about his assumptions. The operators were good, experienced, sharp, willing to push back when something didn't make sense.
but they also recognized expertise when they saw it. And gradually the question shifted from skeptical to collaborative. By 9 a.m., they'd refined the operation to something that looked executable. Not guaranteed, nothing was ever guaranteed, but viable. Cross dismissed the team for a break. Ethan stayed behind, staring at the three-dimensional model, trying to see all the ways it could fail. Kane appeared beside him. "You need to eat something. I need to make sure these people don't die following my advice." "You've done everything you can. The rest is on them." Ethan picked up one of the foam blocks representing the hostage building, turned it over in his hands. "I keep thinking about Lily, about how I'm betting other people's children's lives on a strategy I came up with in 45 minutes. You're betting their lives on experience that took you years to develop. That's different." "Is it?" Kane didn't answer. After a moment, she said, "You know Carter is going to offer you a job. I don't want a job at that hotel. Not as a janitor, something else. She's drowning in bad publicity and you're the life preserver she thinks will save her. Then she's going to be disappointed. Maybe. Or maybe you'll surprise yourself." Ethan set down the foam block. "I should go. Lily's school gets out at 3. I need to be there. The briefing runs until noon. You can leave after. I'm leaving now." Kane studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but Ethan, thank you for what you've done here. It matters. It'll matter when those kids get home safe. Until then, it's just theory." He walked out of the conference room, back through the corridors and up the elevator, and out into morning sunlight that felt too bright for the weight he was carrying. His phone showed 3 more missed calls from Vanessa Carter and one from Dr. Reyna's office. He called the doctor's office first. The receptionist who answered sounded tired. "Mr. Brooks, we've been trying to reach you about Lily's prescription. We can provide samples for 1 more week, but after that you'll need to arrange payment with the pharmacy. I'll have the money by Monday." "Are you sure? Because if there's a gap in her medication, I'm sure." He wasn't, not entirely, but certainty was what the situation required. "Thank you for the samples." He hung up, stared at his phone, then called Vanessa Carter. She answered on the first ring. "Mr. Brooks, I was beginning to think you were avoiding me. I've been busy. So I've noticed. The entire internet has noticed." Her voice carried that same sharp edge from yesterday, but something underneath it had shifted. "We need to discuss what happened in my lobby. I'll be there Friday at 2. I'd prefer today. Friday, 2 p.m. That's what works for me." There was a long pause, then, quietly, "Fine. Friday at 2. But Mr. Brooks? Come prepared to answer questions, because right now I have a lot of them." "So do I, Ms. Carter. So do I." He ended the call, shoved his phone in his pocket, and started walking home. The morning was crisp, the kind of weather that made you believe things might work out despite all evidence to the contrary. Somewhere across the world, 3 children were waiting to be rescued. Somewhere in his apartment, his own daughter was probably waking up, wondering why her father kept disappearing. And somewhere in the space between those 2 realities, Ethan Brooks, janitor, soldier, father, was trying to figure out who he was supposed to be now that the invisible life he'd built had exploded into something he couldn't hide from anymore. By Thursday afternoon, the internet had decided Ethan Brooks was either a hero or a fraud, with no middle ground permitted. The videos from the hotel lobby had spawned a dozen think pieces about military service, class warfare, and the invisible workforce that kept luxury running. Twitter had turned his name into a hashtag. Reddit was trying to find his military records. Someone had started a GoFundMe that he hadn't asked for and didn't want. Ethan sat in the federal building's conference room, watching all of this unfold on muted news channels, while the tactical team ran their final simulations. The operation was scheduled for tomorrow at dawn, overseas time, which meant tonight at 11 p.m. local. 36 hours of planning compressed into something that would either succeed in 17 minutes or fail catastrophically. Cross walked over, holding a tablet that showed real-time satellite feeds of the compound. Guard rotation just changed. Pattern matches what we predicted. Everything's tracking. Patterns change. Ethan didn't look away from the feeds. You need contingencies for if they've altered their security because they know we're coming. We have contingencies.
Do you have contingencies for your contingencies? Cross sat down, the chair creaking under his weight. Sergeant Brooks, I've been running operations for 20 years. I know what I'm doing. So did the commanders who planned the operations that got my friends killed. Ethan finally turned to face him. I'm not questioning your competence. I'm saying that confidence kills people just as dead as incompetence. Noted. Cross set down the tablet. The team is ready. They've run the sequence 40 times. They know their jobs. Knowing your job doesn't mean the job goes according to plan. Then what do you want me to say? That this might fail? It might. That people might die. They might. But sitting here catastrophizing doesn't change those odds. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhausted in ways that sleep wouldn't fix. I want you to promise me something. If this goes wrong, if civilians get hurt because of my strategy, I want that in the official record. My name, my plan, my responsibility. That's not how after-action reports work. Make it how they work. I'm not letting your operators take the fall for my mistakes. Cross studied him with an expression that was hard to read. You really think you're responsible for everything, don't you? Every variable, every outcome, every consequence. I designed the approach. Yeah, I'm responsible. No. You're one input among dozens. The operators execute, I command, intelligence provides data, logistics handles equipment. Failures happen at system level, not individual level. Tell that to the parents if their kids don't come home. Cross stood, picking up his tablet. You've done good work here, Sergeant, but at some point you need to accept that you can't control everything. You can only control your contribution. The rest is on the rest of us. He walked away, leaving Ethan alone with the satellite feeds and the news coverage and the countdown timer showing 8 hours until execution. Kane appeared a few minutes later with sandwiches that looked like they'd been assembled by someone who considered food a logistical requirement rather than a pleasure. You need to eat. I need this operation to succeed. Eating might help with that. Starving yourself definitely won't. She set the sandwich in front of him. Turkey and cheese. It's not great, but it's protein. Ethan picked it up more to make her stop hovering than because he was hungry. The bread was dry. The turkey probably came from a bulk container, but Kane was right. It was protein. Carter called me, Kane said, sitting across from him. Wanted to know if I'd brief her on your military background before your meeting tomorrow. What'd you tell her? That she should ask you herself, that it's not my story to share. Kane pulled out her own sandwich, examined it with mild disgust. But between you and me, she's spiraling. The board is asking questions she can't answer. The media is painting her as the CEO who fired a war hero. Her mother's legacy is getting dragged through comparison pieces about leadership styles. Not my problem. It became your problem when we landed that helicopter in her lobby. Kane took a bite of her sandwich, chewed thoughtfully. She's going to offer you a position, something high level, probably director of security operations. Good salary, benefits that would cover Lily's treatment indefinitely. I don't want to work for someone who humiliated me in public, even if it means financial stability. Especially then, because taking that job would mean letting her buy forgiveness she hasn't earned. Kane smiled slightly. You know what I like about you, Ethan? You're principled in ways that make your life harder. Most people would have taken the job already. Most people don't have my reasons for not trusting authority figures who wield power carelessly. They ate in silence for a while, watching the countdown timer tick closer to operation execution. Around them, the conference room had transformed into something resembling a command center. Multiple screens showing different data streams, communications equipment, personnel moving with purpose between stations. You should go home, Kane said eventually. Be with Lily when the operation runs. You've done everything you can here. What if something goes wrong and they need real-time adjustments? Then Cross and his team will handle it. That's their job. She stood collecting the sandwich wrappers. You're not actually part of this operation, Ethan. You're a consultant. Your work is finished. It's not finished until those kids are safe. Then it'll never be finished, because there will always be more kids who need saving, always more operations, always another crisis. Kane's voice had gone softer. That's why you left, remember? Because you couldn't save everyone, and trying was destroying you. Ethan stared at the satellite feed showing the compound where 3 children were being held hostage, waiting for adults to rescue them. Leaving didn't make it hurt less. It just meant I had to live with walking away. And staying means living with the failures. Either way, you lose. Kane headed toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you made the right call 3 years ago, choosing Lily over the mission. That took more courage than anything you did in combat. She left before he could respond. Ethan sat alone in the command center, surrounded by people preparing for an operation he'd designed, feeling useless and essential simultaneously. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who'd taken Lily to school. Lily asked if you're coming to her art show tonight at 6. I told her you'd probably be working. Hope that's okay? Ethan checked the time. 4:30 p.m. The art show started in 90 minutes. The operation executed in 6.5 hours. He texted back, "I'll be there." Then he stood, gathered his things, and walked out of the command center without telling anyone he was leaving. Cross would understand or he wouldn't. The operation would succeed or it wouldn't. But right now, his daughter had an art show, and that mattered more than watching satellite feeds of a compound halfway around the world. The elementary school auditorium smelled like industrial cleaner and children's ambition. The walls were covered in artwork, paintings, drawings, sculptures made from recycled materials. Parents milled around with the particular exhaustion of people who'd left work early to attend a school function. Ethan found Lily standing beside a display board featuring her ocean painting from earlier in the week, wearing a dress that was slightly too small because he kept forgetting to buy her new clothes. She saw him, and her entire face lit up. "Daddy, you came!" "Of course I came." He knelt down to her level. "Wouldn't miss it." "Mrs. Chen said you were probably too busy." "Never too busy for this." Lily grabbed his hand, pulling him toward her display. "They hung my painting right in the center. Mrs. Henderson said it shows good use of perspective, which I think means the whale isn't too big." The painting looked exactly as it had in the car. Stick figures on yellow sand, wavy ocean lines, a circular sun, but displayed on the wall alongside dozens of other children's artwork. It transformed into something more. Evidence of imagination, proof that his daughter could see beauty even when life gave her reasons not to. "It's perfect," Ethan said quietly. They walked through the auditorium, looking at other kids' work. Lily provided commentary on each piece. Whose was better than hers, whose wasn't, who had clearly gotten help from their parents versus who had done it themselves. The unself-conscious honesty of someone who hadn't learned yet that comparisons were supposed to hurt. Mrs. Henderson, the art teacher, found them near the sculpture display. She was probably in her 50s, with paint-stained hands and the patient energy of someone who'd chosen to work with children on purpose. "Mr. Brooks, so glad you could make it. Lily's been talking about you all week." "Has she?" "Oh yes. My daddy works really hard so I can do art class." "She's very proud of you." Ethan felt something crack inside his chest. "I'm proud of her too. She's talented, real natural instinct for color and composition. If she keeps developing, she could do something special with this." "She can do whatever she wants." Mrs. Henderson smiled. "That's exactly the right answer." The art show lasted an hour. Afterward, Ethan and Lily walked to a small diner 3 blocks from their apartment, the kind of place that served breakfast all day and didn't judge you for ordering pancakes at 7 p.m. They sat in a booth by the window while traffic moved past outside, the city shifting from day to night. Lily ordered pancakes with chocolate chips. Ethan got coffee and tried to remember the last time he'd eaten a real meal. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you in trouble?" The question landed like a physical blow. Ethan set down his coffee cup carefully. "Why would you think I'm in trouble?" "Because Mrs. Chen showed me videos on her phone of you at the hotel with soldiers, and she said people on the internet are talking about you." Lily picked at her napkin. "I didn't know you were a soldier. You never told me." Every parenting instinct Ethan had was screaming at him to deflect, to change the subject, to protect her from truths she was too young to carry. But she was already carrying them, had been carrying his worry and his exhaustion and his secrets without complaining. "I was a soldier," he said quietly. "Before you were born and for a while after. But then Mommy died, and I decided being your dad was more important than being a soldier." "Why didn't you tell me?" Because I didn't want you to think about that part of my life. I wanted you to just think about us. Lily considered this, her 8-year-old brain working through implications she shouldn't have to consider. Were you a good soldier? I was good at the job. Whether that makes me a good person is more complicated. Mrs. Chen said you're a hero. Mrs. Chen is very kind. But are you? The waitress arrived with Lily's pancakes, giving Ethan a few seconds to construct an answer that wasn't a lie, but wouldn't give her nightmares. The pancakes were enormous, drowning in syrup, chocolate chips melting into pools of brown sugar. Heroes are what we call people who do dangerous jobs, Ethan said finally. But doing a dangerous job doesn't make you special. It just makes you someone who had that job. The important part is what you do afterward. And what did you do afterward? I became your dad, which is the only job I've ever had that really mattered. Lily smiled, cutting into her pancakes. That's a good answer. They ate in comfortable silence, the diner humming around them with the low conversation of other people's lives. Normal people who probably weren't thinking about hostage rescues or military operations or the weight of choices that couldn't be unmade. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. A text from Kane. Operation is go. T-minus 3 hours. You should get some rest. He typed back. Not happening, then put the phone away. Lily had chocolate on her face. Ethan handed her a napkin. You've got something right there. She wiped at her face, missing the spot entirely. Did I get it? Not even close. She tried again, still missing. Ethan reached across the table and cleaned it himself, the way he'd done 1,000 times when she was smaller. She tolerated this with the long-suffering patience of kids who thought they were too old for parental intervention, but secretly didn't mind. They left the diner around 8 p.m. The walk home was quiet, Lily holding his hand the way she used to before she'd decided she was too grown up for it. The apartment building looked exactly as they'd left it, slightly shabby, definitely affordable, and theirs. Inside the apartment, Lily went through her evening routine without being told. Homework already finished, bath taken quickly, teeth brushed with the speed of someone eager to get to the fun part of the night. Ethan sat on the couch, trying not to check his phone every 30 seconds for updates he knew wouldn't come yet. Lily emerged from the bathroom in her pajamas, carrying a book. Will you read to me? You're getting too old for bedtime stories. I'm 8. That's not too old. She had a point. Ethan followed her to her room, sat on the edge of her bed while she got situated under the covers. The book she'd chosen was about a girl who discovered a magical library where every book was a portal to a different world. He read 2 chapters, doing different voices for the characters the way he always did. Lily laughed at the funny parts, asked questions during the confusing parts, and gradually her eyes started closing. Daddy? Her voice was sleepy. If you had to be a soldier again, would you? Ethan closed the book. I'm not going to be a soldier again. But what if people needed you? Other people can help them. I need to be here with you. Okay. She yawned. But if you did have to go, I'd understand, because helping people is important. You're more important. I know, but other people's kids are important too. Her eyes were closed now. That's what Mrs. Henderson says, that everyone's kid is someone's whole world. Ethan sat there for a long time after she fell asleep, watching her breathe, trying to memorize the exact shape of this moment. Because tomorrow everything would change. The operation would succeed or fail, Vanessa Carter would offer him a job he didn't want, and his carefully constructed invisible life would be permanently shattered. But right now his daughter was safe, and that was enough. He returned to the living room, finally allowing himself to check his phone. Multiple messages from Kane, updating him on operation status. The team was in position. Equipment checks were complete. Weather was cooperating. Everything was tracking according to plan. Ethan opened his laptop, pulled up the secure feed Kane had given him access to. The compound appeared on screen, thermal imaging showing heat signatures exactly where they were supposed to be. The hostages clustered in the central building, guards at their posts. No indication they knew what was coming. The operation timer showed 90 minutes until execution. Ethan made coffee he didn't need and wouldn't drink, then sat on the couch, staring at the screen. Watching people who didn't know they were being watched, preparing to implement a strategy he designed, betting everything on his ability to see angles other people missed. His phone rang, Kane's number. You're supposed to be sleeping, she said when he answered. You're supposed to be commanding an operation. Cross is commanding.
I'm observing. There's a difference. Background noise suggested she was in some kind of tactical operations center, equipment humming, people talking in low voices. Wanted to check in, see if you had any last-minute insights. Don't let them rush. Rushing gets people killed. Noted. Anything else? Yeah. If this goes wrong, make sure someone tells the hostages' families that we tried, that we didn't just abandon them. Ethan, it's not going to go wrong. You don't know that. No, I don't. But I know we've done everything possible to make it succeed. The rest is just execution. She paused. How's Lily? Asleep, dreaming about whatever 8-year-olds dream about. That's good. That's what we're doing this for, so kids can sleep safely and dream about kid things. Is it? Ethan's voice came out harsher than intended. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like we're doing this because we didn't find a better solution.
Because violence is still the answer we reach for when diplomacy fails. Sometimes violence is the only answer. You know that. Knowing it doesn't make it feel less like failure. Kane was quiet for a moment. I need to go. Operation starts in 75 minutes. Try to get some rest. I'll rest when those kids are home. She hung up without responding. Ethan set down the phone, returned his attention to the laptop screen. The thermal signatures hadn't changed. The compound sat there in infrared color, waiting for something to happen. At 10:15 p.m., his phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected number. Vanessa Carter. I know you're meeting me tomorrow, but I wanted to say something tonight. I'm sorry for how I treated you, for not seeing you. I was wrong. Ethan stared at the message for a full minute before responding. Apologies don't undo damage, but they're a start. Her reply came quickly. I want to make this right, whatever that takes. We'll talk tomorrow. He put the phone away. The apology was something, more than he'd expected, less than what the situation required. But sincerity was hard to judge through text messages, and he was too exhausted to analyze her motivations right now. The operation timer showed 45 minutes. Ethan stood, paced the small living room, tried not to think about all the ways the plan could fail. Water system malfunction, guards discovering the team during infiltration, hostages panicking during extraction, ceilings that wouldn't support the operator's weight, timing that fell apart under real-world friction. At 10:40 p.m., the secure feed changed. Movement at the compound's northwest corner, exactly where the water tanks were located. Someone in infrared approached, inspected the tanks, noticed the deliberately created malfunction. The bait was set. At 10:45, more movement. 2 guards heading toward the tank access point to investigate. The team would be waiting in the maintenance tunnels, ready to move the moment the hatch opened. At 10:50, the hatch opened. Thermal signatures disappeared into the tunnel system, the team moving forward while guards were distracted above ground. Ethan's hands were shaking. He gripped the edge of the couch to make them stop. At 10:53, the diversionary assault began on the east perimeter. Loud, obvious, exactly what the defensive positions were designed to counter. Thermal signatures showed guards converging on the threat, exactly as predicted. At 10:56, the team reached the electrical access point above the hostage room. Ethan could see them on thermal, 4 signatures clustered at ceiling level, right above the 14 signatures that represented American civilians waiting to be saved. At 10:57, chaos. Flashbangs detonated inside the hostage room. The thermal imaging went white with heat bloom, then resolved into confused movement. Signatures scattering, operators dropping from ceiling, guards stumbling blind and disoriented. Gunfire. Brief, precise, controlled. 3 guard signatures going down. The rest retreating or surrendering. At 10:59, the hostages were moving. Being guided, carried, rushed toward the extraction point through the maintenance tunnels, while the diversionary assault kept the compound's attention focused elsewhere. At 11:02, the last hostage cleared the tunnel system. At 11:04, the team was at the extraction point, a cleared landing zone half a kilometer from the compound. At 11:06, helicopters appeared on thermal, touching down just long enough to collect personnel. At 11:08, everyone was airborne. The operation was over. 17 minutes start to finish. No friendly casualties. No civilian casualties. All 14 hostages rescued, including 3 children who would get to see their parents again. Ethan's phone rang. Kane's voice was electric with relief. "We did it! Everyone's out! Everyone's safe!" He couldn't speak. Something had lodged in his throat. Not quite crying, not quite laughing, just the overwhelming release of tension he'd been carrying for 3 days. "Ethan, you there?" "Yeah." His voice sounded strange. "I'm here." "Your plan worked, exactly like you said it would. The ceiling approach, the timing, the diversionary assault, perfect execution." "The team executed. I just pointed them at an approach." "Take the win, Ethan. For once in your life, just take the win." She paused. "Those 3 kids are going home because of you. Let yourself feel good about that." After she hung up, Ethan sat in the silence of his apartment, staring at the laptop screen where thermal signatures were dispersing, the compound returning to its pre-operation state like nothing had happened. But something had happened. 3 children who'd been terrified were now safe. 14 people who'd faced execution were flying toward reunions with families who'd been praying for miracles. And he'd helped make that possible. The weight he'd been carrying started to lift, just slightly. Not gone. It would never be fully gone, but lighter. Bearable. He closed the laptop, checked on Lily one more time, still sleeping, still safe, still dreaming, then returned to the couch and finally let himself sleep. He woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Lily standing beside the couch, already dressed for school. "Daddy, you fell asleep with your shoes on." Ethan sat up, disoriented. "What time is it?" 7:30. "Mrs. Chen said she'd take me to school again if you needed to sleep more." "No, I'm up." He stood, his back protesting the night spent on a couch that had never been designed for comfort. "Give me 10 minutes to get ready." He showered quickly, changed into clean clothes, tried to make himself look like someone who hadn't spent the previous night watching a hostage rescue operation in real time. In the kitchen, Lily was making herself cereal, the only breakfast she could prepare without supervision. "Are you working today?" she asked around a mouthful of cornflakes. "I've got a meeting this afternoon, but I'll pick you up from school." "Okay, can we go to the park after?" "Maybe. We'll see," she grinned. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." He dropped her at school, watched her run toward the building with her backpack bouncing, then drove toward the Crown Meridian Hotel with his stomach twisted into knots that had nothing to do with hunger. The hotel looked exactly as it had 4 days ago. Expensive, imposing, designed to make normal people feel inadequate. Ethan parked in the guest lot, checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, and tried to prepare for a conversation he didn't want to have with a woman who'd destroyed him publicly and now wanted something from him. The lobby was busy with the lunch crowd, business travelers checking in, tourists consulting maps, the usual flow of people with money to spend and places to be. Ethan walked past the fountain where he'd been cleaning a coffee spill when his life had imploded, past the concierge desk where staff members recognized him and quickly looked away. Vanessa Carter's office was on the 10th floor. The elevator ride up felt like preparation for execution, slow, inevitable, with no good options for escape. The doors opened onto a reception area that was all glass and marble and uncomfortable furniture designed to make visitors feel unwelcome. The receptionist looked up. "Mr. Brooks? I have a 2 p.m. appointment. Miss Carter's expecting you. Go right in." The office beyond was corner view, floor-to-ceiling windows, and enough square footage to comfortably fit Ethan's entire apartment. Vanessa stood behind her desk, wearing a different severe business suit, but the same expression of controlled determination. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for coming. You made it sound non-optional. Please sit." She gestured to chairs arranged around a small conference table near the windows. Not behind her desk, a deliberate choice to signal this wasn't a power play. Ethan sat. Vanessa joined him, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Her confidence from earlier in the week had developed cracks. She looked tired, stressed, like someone who'd discovered that certainty was less reliable than she'd believed. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "A real one, not just a text message. What I did to you in the lobby was inexcusable. I didn't listen. I didn't ask questions. I just assumed I knew better and destroyed you publicly." "You did." "I know, and I can't undo that, but I can try to make it right." She pulled out a folder, set it on the table between them. I'm offering you the position of Director of Security Operations for the entire Crown Meridian hotel chain. $90,000 a year, full benefits, medical coverage that would handle your daughter's treatment indefinitely. Ethan didn't touch the folder. Why? Because you're qualified. Because you have skills we need. Because... No. Why are you really offering this? He leaned forward. Is it because you feel guilty? Because the board is pressuring you? Because you need me to fix your public relations disaster? Vanessa's expression flickered, surprised that he'd cut through to the core that fast. All of those reasons. And one more, which is? Because watching those soldiers call you Master Sergeant made me realize I've spent my entire career evaluating people based on surfaces, job titles, appearances, whether they fit my expectations. And I've missed everything that actually matters. She met his eyes. You spent 2 years keeping this hotel running better than anyone realized. You researched marble composition so you could do your job better than the manual required. You showed up early, stayed late, never complained, and I never saw you until soldiers forced me to. That's what being invisible means. You're only seen when you become useful to people who matter. You mattered the entire time, I just didn't notice. Ethan picked up the folder, flipped through the offer letter. The salary was real. The benefits were comprehensive. It was more money than he'd made in his life, doing work that wouldn't require him to push a mop or take orders from people who didn't respect him. It was also everything he'd told himself he didn't want. I need to think about it, he said. Of course. Take the weekend. But Ethan, she hesitated. This isn't charity, and it's not just guilt. I've been reviewing our security protocols since Wednesday. They're inadequate. We've been relying on outdated systems and undertrained staff. You could actually improve things here. Or I could take a job somewhere that didn't humiliate me first. You could, and I'd understand. Vanessa stood, walked to the windows overlooking the city. My mother built this company through force of will and absolute control. Everyone feared her, including me. When she died, I inherited that fear and turned it into my leadership style. I thought strength meant never admitting uncertainty, never showing weakness, never listening to people I'd decided weren't worth hearing. And now? Now I'm learning that strength might mean something different, that admitting I was wrong doesn't make me weak, that listening to janitors might teach me more than board meetings. She turned back to face him. I can't force you to take this job, but I'm asking you to consider it. Not for me, for what you could build here. Ethan stood, tucking the folder under his arm. I'll let you know Monday. Fair enough. She walked him to the door, then paused. The operation last night, the hostage rescue. I saw the news this morning. Did you? I can't talk about that. Right, of course. She opened the door. But if you were involved, and if it succeeded the way the reports suggest, then I'm glad. Those families got their people back because someone cared enough to help. That matters. Ethan left without responding. The elevator ride down felt different than the ride up. Not quite better, but less like preparation for disaster. In the lobby, he noticed things he'd never paid attention to when he'd worked here. The way staff moved through spaces like choreography. The invisible labor that kept luxury functioning. The fact that everyone working here was someone's whole world to somebody. Outside, he called Kane. How'd it go? She answered. She offered me director of security, good pay, benefits, the whole package. You gonna take it? I don't know. Part of me wants to tell her where she can put her job offer. Another part knows Lily needs the medical coverage. So take the weekend to decide. You've earned that much. Ethan walked to his car, unlocked it, sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. Through the windshield, he could see the hotel's main entrance, the place where soldiers had landed a helicopter 4 days ago and transformed his carefully invisible life into something he couldn't hide from anymore. His phone buzzed. A news alert. Hostage rescue success. 14 Americans freed in daring raid. The article included photos of families reuniting, children hugging parents, tears of relief that the camera had captured with intrusive precision. 3 kids who got to go home because someone had asked for help and he'd been unable to say no. Ethan started the car and drove to Lily's school, arriving 20 minutes early. He sat in the pickup line, watching other parents on their phones or reading or just waiting. Normal people doing normal parent things. He'd spent 3 years trying to be one of them, trying to disappear into ordinary life. But maybe disappearing wasn't the answer. Maybe the answer was figuring out how to be visible without losing himself in the process. Lily emerged from the building at exactly 3 o'clock, spotted his car, and ran over with the boundless energy of someone who'd been sitting still for too long. She climbed into the passenger seat, already talking. Tommy Bradshaw got in trouble for putting glue in Sarah Martinez's hair during art class, and Mrs. Henderson said it was going to take professional help to fix it, which probably means Sarah's going to have a really bad haircut for a while. And can we go to the park now? Ethan pulled out of the pickup line. Yeah, we can go to the park. They spent 2 hours there, Lily playing on equipment that had seen better days while Ethan sat on a bench trying to decide what kind of future he wanted to build. The job offer sat in his car, waiting for an answer. The hostage rescue was already fading into classified history that would never officially acknowledge his involvement, and his daughter was laughing on a swing set, unaware that her father was trying to choose between financial security and his own stubborn pride. As the sun started setting, painting the playground in orange light, Lily ran over and collapsed on the bench beside him. I'm tired, she announced. Good tired or bad tired? Good tired, the kind where you did stuff you wanted to do. She leaned against his shoulder. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? We can have whatever you want. They drove home, made spaghetti together in their tiny kitchen, ate while watching a cooking competition show that Lily found endlessly entertaining. Normal evening, normal routine, the kind of ordinary life Ethan had spent 3 years building. But ordinary wasn't feeling sufficient anymore. Not when he knew he could do more, be more, help more, if he just stopped hiding from who he used to be. After Lily went to bed, Ethan sat on the couch and opened the job offer folder again. $90,000, medical coverage, the chance to actually use his skills for something meaningful, and the trade-off of working for someone who'd destroyed him publicly and was now trying to buy his forgiveness. He pulled out his phone, typed a message to Vanessa Carter. I'll take the job, but on my terms. We need to talk about what those terms are. Her response came 3 minutes later. Monday morning, 9 a.m., my office. We'll negotiate. Ethan set down his phone, feeling something shift inside him. Not quite hope, not quite fear. Maybe just the recognition that invisible wasn't working anymore, and visible meant taking risks he'd spent 3 years avoiding. Outside his window, the city hummed with its usual nighttime energy. Somewhere out there, families were reuniting with hostages who'd been saved by an operation he'd helped design. Somewhere else, his old life was waiting to see if he'd let it back in. And in the next room, his daughter was sleeping safely, dreaming about art class and playgrounds and all the ordinary magic that made survival worthwhile. That was enough. For now, it was enough. Monday morning arrived with rain that turned the city gray and made traffic move like sludge through clogged arteries. Ethan sat in his car outside the Crown Meridian, watching water sheet down the windshield while his phone showed 8:45 a.m. 15 minutes until he walked into Vanessa Carter's office to negotiate terms for a job he still wasn't sure he wanted. The weekend had passed in a blur of normal activities that felt anything but normal. Lily's art class on Saturday, grocery shopping on Sunday, cooking meals and reading bedtime stories while his mind ran through scenarios of how this meeting could go wrong. He'd written down his terms on a notepad at 2 a.m. Sunday night, then thrown the list away because it sounded too aggressive. Then rewritten it, then thrown that away too. In the end, he decided to just say what needed saying and let the consequences sort themselves out. He got out of the car, jogged through the rain to the hotel entrance, and stepped into the lobby where he'd been humiliated less than a week ago. Staff members recognized him. Some nodded acknowledgement, others looked away quickly like they weren't sure what protocol applied to former janitors who'd become something else. The elevator to the 10th floor was empty. Ethan watched the numbers climb, his reflection distorted in the brushed metal doors. He looked tired, older than 32, like someone who'd spent years carrying weight that didn't have a name. The receptionist outside Vanessa's office looked up when he entered. "Mr. Brooks, go right in. She's expecting you." Vanessa was standing at the windows when he entered, staring out at the rain-soaked city. She turned when she heard the door, and Ethan noticed immediately that she looked different. Not the suit, still severe, still expensive, but something in her posture had shifted. less rigid, more uncertain. Ethan, thanks for coming. She gestured to the conference table. Coffee? I'm fine. They sat across from each other, and for a moment neither spoke. The rain hammered against the windows, filling the silence with white noise that made the office feel isolated from the rest of the building. You said you'd take the job on your terms, Vanessa said finally. I'm listening. Ethan leaned back in his chair. First term? I report directly to you, not to some middle manager who's going to undermine every decision I make. If I'm running security for this hotel chain, I need actual authority. Agreed. Second, any employee I identify as underperforming or creating security vulnerabilities gets retrained or reassigned. I'm not working with people who cut corners. That's reasonable? Third, I need flexibility for my daughter. If she has a medical emergency or school event, I leave immediately. No questions, no guilt trips, no passive-aggressive comments about commitment. Vanessa nodded. Of course. Family comes first. Does it? Ethan's voice sharpened. Because 5 days ago, you fired me without asking why I needed my paycheck immediately. You didn't care that I had a daughter who needed medication. You just cared that I'd broken your rules. She flinched. You're right. I didn't ask. I should have. So when I say family comes first, I need to know you actually mean it. Not just in theory, but in practice. Because the first time you make me choose between Lily and this job, I'm choosing her. And I'm not going to feel bad about it. Understood. Vanessa folded her hands on the table. What else? I want transparency about the board. Who's going to push back against my hiring? Who's going to try to undermine me because they don't like the optics of a former janitor in a leadership position? Richard Vaughn will be your biggest problem. Vanessa's expression hardened. He's chairman of the board, old friend of my mother's, and he thinks I'm too young and too soft to run this company. He's been looking for reasons to force me out since I took over. So hiring me gives him ammunition. Probably. But I'm hiring you anyway because it's the right decision. She met his eyes. Vaughn doesn't get to dictate who works here, and if he tries to cause problems, I'll handle him. How? I'm still figuring that part out. A slight smile. But I've got a pretty good strategist on payroll now. Maybe you'll have ideas. Ethan studied her, trying to read whether this was genuine or performance. She'd spent their first encounter projecting absolute certainty. Now she was admitting uncertainty, which was either growth or manipulation designed to make him feel needed. Last term, he said, I need you to understand something about who I am and what I'm not. I'm not a hero. I'm not some decorated soldier who's going to make your hotel look patriotic for PR purposes. I did a job, it broke parts of me, and I left. If you're hiring me because you think my military background is good marketing, we're done right now. I'm hiring you because you see problems other people miss. Because you research marble composition when you could have just followed the manual. Because when soldiers needed a strategy, you designed something that saved lives. Vanessa's voice had gone quiet. That's not marketing. That's just who you are. The rain continued hammering the windows. Somewhere below, the hotel was operating at full capacity. Guests checking in and out, staff serving meals and cleaning rooms, the constant machinery of hospitality grinding forward. Okay, Ethan said finally. I'll take the job. Just like that? Just like that. But if you ever treat another employee the way you treated me, I'm gone. And I'm taking every security vulnerability I've identified with me. Vanessa extended her hand across the table. Deal. They shook on it, and Ethan felt the weight of the decision settle onto his shoulders. He'd spent 3 years trying to disappear, and now he'd just agreed to become visible in ways that would make hiding impossible. The next 2 weeks passed in a controlled avalanche of work that made Ethan remember why he'd left operational planning in the first place. He spent his days auditing security systems, interviewing staff, identifying weaknesses in protocols that had been neglected for years. The hotel's security was a mess. Outdated cameras with blind spots, access control that relied on easily duplicated key cards, emergency procedures that assumed everyone would remain calm during a crisis. He wrote reports that read like indictments of the previous security director's competence. Vanessa read them without comment, then approved every recommendation he made. Budgets got allocated. Equipment got ordered. Staff started looking at him with the particular nervousness of people who weren't sure if he was there to help or threaten them. Lily adjusted to the new routine with the flexibility of kids who still believed adults knew what they were doing. She liked that he could pick her up from school on time now, that they could afford new clothes without worrying about the grocery budget, that her medication refills no longer required complicated financial negotiations. But she also noticed the stress.
"Daddy, you have your worried face again," she said one evening while they were making dinner. "Do I?" "Yes, the one where your eyebrows do that thing," she demonstrated, scrunching her face into an exaggerated frown. "That's not what I look like." "That's exactly what you look like." She returned to chopping vegetables with the plastic knife he'd given her because she'd insisted on helping. "Is your new job hard?" "It's different. I'm still figuring it out." Mrs. Henderson says figuring stuff out is how you get better at things. Like how I used to be bad at painting, but now I'm good. You were never bad at painting. I was a little bad. Remember when I painted that tree and it looked like broccoli? Ethan smiled despite everything. I remember, but I still thought it was beautiful. They ate dinner at their small table, Lily chattering about her day while Ethan tried to focus on her stories instead of the security audit report he needed to finish tonight. After dinner, homework. After homework, reading time. After reading, the slow ritual of bedtime that had become the only part of his day that felt uncomplicated. He was reading to her. They'd moved on to a different book about a boy who discovered he could talk to animals when she interrupted. "Daddy, are we rich now?" The question caught him off guard. "What?" "Sarah Martinez said her mom saw an article about you online. That you work at a fancy hotel doing important stuff. She said we must be rich now." Ethan closed the book. "We're not rich. We're just not struggling as much." "What's the difference?" "Rich means you have more than you need. Not struggling means you can pay for what you need without being scared. Those are very different things." Lily considered this. "But we can afford my medicine now without you being stressed, right?" "Right." "Then I think that's good enough." She was asleep 5 minutes later. Ethan sat there for a while, watching her breathe, trying to remember when she'd gotten perceptive enough to notice his stress levels and mature enough to ask direct questions about money. Back in the living room, he opened his laptop and pulled up the security audit. He was 3/4 through when his phone rang. Vanessa's number, calling at 10 p.m. "This better be important," he answered. "We have a situation." Her voice was tight. "Can you get to the hotel?" "What kind of situation?" "The kind where I need my security director's expertise immediately." Ethan glanced toward Lily's closed door. "I've got my daughter here." "Bring her. I'll have a staff member stay with her in my office." "Vanessa." "Ethan, please. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." 20 minutes later, Ethan was pulling into the hotel's parking garage with a confused 8-year-old in the passenger seat. "Why are we at your work?" Lily asked, rubbing her eyes. "Because my boss needs help with something. You're going to stay in her office for a little while." "Is this because of the important stuff Sarah's mom was talking about?" "Probably." Vanessa met them in the lobby, looking more disheveled than Ethan had ever seen her. Her hair was coming loose from its usual severe arrangement. Her suit jacket was missing. She looked like someone who'd been dealing with a crisis for hours. "Thank you for coming." She knelt down to Lily's level. "Hi, I'm Vanessa. You must be Lily." "Hi." Lily eyed her with the natural suspicion of kids meeting strangers. "My dad says you're his boss." "I am, and right now I need to borrow him for a little while. Is that okay?" "I guess." Lily looked at Ethan. "Are you going to be doing dangerous stuff?" "No, sweetheart, just boring work stuff." Vanessa led them to her office, where a young woman from HR was waiting with coloring books and snacks. Lily settled in with the cautious acceptance of someone who'd learned that sometimes plans changed and you just had to adapt. In the hallway outside, Vanessa's composure cracked. "We've got a guest holding someone hostage in room 847. He's demanding to speak with management, won't talk to police, and he specifically asked for the veteran everyone's been talking about." Ethan's entire body went cold. "He asked for me by name?" "Not by name. He said the soldier who works here." "The police are downstairs. SWAT is setting up.
but the negotiator said he'd stand a better chance if you were involved. I'm not a negotiator, but you understand tactical situations better than anyone here. And apparently this guy is ex-military too. The negotiator thinks soldier-to-soldier communication might work. They took the elevator to the 8th floor where police had established a perimeter. Officers in tactical gear stood at intervals, weapons ready but not raised. At the end of the hall, a negotiator crouched behind a housekeeping cart, phone pressed to his ear. The negotiator looked up when they approached. You Brooks? Yeah. Detective Marcus Liu. The guy in 847 is Thomas Keller, 48, dishonorably discharged from the Army 6 years ago. He's got his ex-wife in there with him. They were supposed to be having a reconciliation dinner. It went bad. He armed? We think so. Ex-wife managed to trigger a panic alert on her phone before he grabbed it. But he hasn't made any overt threats yet. Just keeps saying he wants to talk to the soldier who works here. What's his discharge story? Insubordination. Assaulted a superior officer, but before that he had a decent service record. 2 deployments, honorable conduct, the works. Ethan studied the hallway, running calculations. You try emotional de-escalation? For 2 hours. He's not interested. Keeps saying civilians don't understand what he's been through, that he needs someone who gets it. So he's looking for validation. Or looking for an excuse. Liu's expression was grim. I've seen this before. Former soldier who can't adjust, feels betrayed by the system, looking for someone to blame. His ex-wife is convenient because she left him. Management is convenient because they represent authority. You're convenient because you're everything he used to be. That doesn't mean I can help. No, but you might be able to buy us time to position SWAT for entry. Ethan looked back toward the elevator, thinking about Lily sitting in Vanessa's office, probably coloring in pictures of animals, thinking about how he'd told her nothing dangerous was happening. Give me the phone. Liu handed over the cell they'd been using for negotiation. Ethan dialed room 847. Listened to it ring 4 times before someone picked up. Who's this? The voice was rough, stressed, on the edge of something. Ethan Brooks. I heard you wanted to talk to me. You the soldier. Yeah. Shadow Wolf? Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not who I am anymore. But it's who you were. I looked you up, saw the videos from the lobby. You're famous now. I'm not famous, I'm just trying to do my job. Your job. Keller laughed, but there was no humor in it. You got a job, got respect, got people treating you like you matter. Meanwhile, I'm working construction part-time and watching everyone pretend I don't exist. Then we've got something in common, because I was invisible for 3 years before last week. Silence on the line. Then, you were a janitor. Yeah. Why? Because I had a daughter to take care of and rent to pay. Same reason anyone takes a job. But you're Shadow Wolf, you're a hero. I'm a father who needed steady income, that's all. Ethan could feel the SWAT team positioning, could see Vanessa watching from down the hall. Look, Thomas, can I call you Thomas? Tom. I don't know what you're going through, but I know that whatever point you're trying to make right now, it's not going to end the way you want it to. You don't know what I want. I know you didn't plan this. I know it escalated faster than you expected, and now you're in a corner and you're trying to figure out how to get out without losing more than you've already lost. Another long silence. When Tom spoke again, his voice had changed, less angry, more desperate. She left me because I wasn't the same person anymore. Because the war broke something and I couldn't fix it. And everyone just expects you to come home and be fine, like you can just turn off years of training and trauma and go back to being normal. Yeah, they do expect that. How'd you do it? How'd you come home and build a life? Ethan closed his eyes. I didn't, not for a long time. I just survived, and sometimes survival looked like success to people who didn't know the difference. But Tom, right now you've got your ex-wife scared and police outside and no good exits. So whatever you thought this conversation was going to be, it needs to end with you opening that door and walking out. And then what? Go back to being invisible? No, go back to figuring out who you are now, because the person you were doesn't exist anymore, and the person you're trying to be right now isn't sustainable. Easy for you to say. You got rescued. Soldiers came and made you important again. They didn't rescue me. They just made my problems visible to people who'd been ignoring them. Ethan's voice hardened. And I'm still figuring out if that was a blessing or a curse. But Tom, whatever answers you're looking for, they're not in that hotel room. The line went quiet. Ethan could hear breathing, could sense Tom trying to decide whether to commit to disaster or find an exit. Put your ex-wife on the phone, Ethan said. Let me hear she's okay. Rustling, a woman's voice shaking. I'm fine. He hasn't hurt me, but he's got a gun and he's scared and... Tom came back on the line. See? She's fine. I'm not some monster. I know you're not, but you're in a situation where very bad things could happen very fast. So I need you to think about what you actually want here. Do you want to hurt someone? Or do you want someone to acknowledge that you're in pain? Tom's voice broke. I want to not be broken anymore. I want to be who I was before. That's not possible. But becoming someone new is. Someone better, maybe. But not if you're in prison or dead. You think I'm going to prison? I think that depends on what happens in the next 5 minutes. You open that door, let your ex-wife walk out, cooperate with police. That's one outcome. Anything else is a much worse outcome. Ethan could hear Lou coordinating with SWAT, could see officers positioning for entry if this went wrong, could feel Vanessa's eyes on him, expecting him to fix this the way he'd fixed the hostage rescue strategy. Tom, I've got a daughter sleeping in an office downstairs. I came here tonight because they said you wanted to talk to me, but I need to get back to her, so please, end this now while you still have choices. More silence. Then, if I walk out, they're going to arrest me. Yeah, they are. But you'll be alive and your ex-wife will be alive, and tomorrow you'll have options you won't have if this escalates. What kind of options? Legal options, medical options, the kind of help you should have gotten years ago. Ethan glanced at Lou, who was nodding slowly. Look, I don't have magic answers, but I know that what you're doing right now isn't solving anything. It's just making everything worse. The line went quiet for so long Ethan thought Tom had hung up. Then, okay. I'm opening the door. Tell them not to shoot me. Nobody's going to shoot you if you follow instructions. Put down any weapons. Hands where they can see them. Move slowly. Okay? Tom's voice was barely a whisper. Okay. The line disconnected. Ethan handed the phone back to Lou, who was already coordinating with SWAT. They watched the door to 847 open slowly. A woman stumbled out first, mid-40s, crying, visibly shaken. Officers moved forward to extract her while Tom emerged behind her, hands raised, empty. The arrest was quick and professional. Tom didn't resist, didn't say anything. Just let them cuff him and lead him toward the elevator while medics checked his ex-wife for injuries. Lou approached Ethan. That was good work. You may have just saved 2 lives. I got lucky. He was looking for permission to quit. Still counts. Lou holstered his phone. You ever want a job in crisis negotiation? Call me. After the police cleared out, after the evidence team photographed the room, after the hotel staff started putting the 8th floor back together, Vanessa found Ethan standing at the end of the hallway looking drained. You okay? She asked. I need to get Lily home. Of course. She hesitated. What you did tonight, don't. Whatever you're about to say, just don't. I talked a desperate man down from doing something stupid. That doesn't make me a hero. It makes me someone who is available. They rode the elevator down in silence. In Vanessa's office, Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, surrounded by coloring books and half-eaten snacks. The HR staffer looked relieved to be released from babysitting duty. Ethan gathered his daughter carefully, lifting her without waking her. She muttered something in her sleep and settled against his shoulder, trusting in the way kids trust when they've never been given reason not to. Thank you, Vanessa said quietly, for coming, for helping. You're paying me to handle security situations. That's what I did. It was more than that. It really wasn't. Ethan adjusted Lily's weight, headed for the door. I'll finish the security audit by Wednesday. We need to talk about staffing levels in the parking garage. Ethan. He turned back. Vanessa was standing in the middle of her office, looking smaller somehow than she had a week ago. Less certain, more human. What you said to him. About survival looking like success to people who don't know the difference. Did you mean that? Every word. Are you still just surviving? Ethan looked down at his sleeping daughter, then back at Vanessa. I'm working on it. The drive home was quiet. Lily unconscious in the passenger seat, the city lights smearing past rain-wet windows. Ethan's hands were shaking slightly on the steering wheel, adrenaline dump, familiar from years of operations that had ended without bloodshed but could have gone wrong in 100 ways. He carried Lily upstairs, tucked her into bed without her waking, then sat in the living room trying to process what had just happened. Tom Keller could have killed someone tonight, could have killed himself, could have created a disaster that would have haunted Ethan for the rest of his life. Instead, he was in custody, his ex-wife was safe, and Ethan was sitting on a couch at midnight trying to convince himself he'd done the right thing by getting involved. His phone buzzed, a text from Kane. Saw the news. Hotel hostage situation. That was you, wasn't it? Ethan typed back, can't talk about it. Of course you can't. But I'm glad you were there, are you? Because this is exactly the kind of thing I was trying to avoid when I left. No. You were trying to avoid dying overseas. This is different. This is using your skills to help people who need it. Feels the same from where I'm sitting. Then you're sitting in the wrong place. Go check on your daughter and remember why you're doing this. Ethan set down the phone, walked to Lily's room, stood in the doorway watching her sleep. She'd kicked off half her blankets. Her stuffed rabbit had fallen on the floor. The nightlight cast soft shadows across her face. This was why. Not the money, not the job title, not the recognition from people who'd ignored him a week ago. Just this. His daughter safe, his daughter sleeping, his daughter dreaming about things that didn't include her father's trauma. He retrieved the rabbit, fixed her blankets, and returned to the living room. The next 3 days were a blur of work that felt like preparation for something he couldn't name. The security audit got finished and submitted. Vanessa approved every recommendation, including the expensive ones. Staff started implementing new protocols, initially resistant but gradually accepting that maybe someone actually cared about doing things right. On Thursday, Ethan was reviewing camera placements in the parking garage when Gerald Humphrey approached, looking uncomfortable. Brooks, got a minute? Sure. Gerald shifted his weight, clearly struggling with something. I wanted to apologize for not standing up for you when Ms. Carter fired you. I should have said something, should have defended you. You would have gotten fired too. Maybe. But that's not an excuse. Gerald met his eyes. You were a good worker, better than most people realized. And I'm sorry I let you get humiliated without saying anything. Ethan studied him, seeing genuine regret mixed with the particular guilt of people who'd stayed silent when silence had cost someone everything. Apology accepted, Ethan said finally. But Gerald, next time someone's getting destroyed unjustly, don't wait for it to be safe to speak up, because silence isn't neutral. It's complicity. I know, I'll do better. After Gerald left, Ethan continued his camera review, marking blind spots on his tablet. The parking garage had 16 major vulnerabilities. He'd fix them all, implement new lighting, improve sightlines, make this place safer than it had any right to be. His phone rang. Kane's number. You're calling a lot this week, he answered, because things keep happening that involve you. Have you seen the board meeting agenda? I don't get board meeting agendas. Well, you're on it. Richard Vaughn is proposing a vote of no confidence in Vanessa's leadership. He's citing the public relations disaster from last week, questionable hiring decisions, meaning you, and failure to maintain the standards her mother established. Ethan stopped walking. When's the meeting? Tomorrow. 2 p.m. And Ethan, this is going to get ugly. Vaughn's been building this case for months. Your hiring just gave him ammunition he can use. So Vanessa's going to lose her position because she gave me a job. Possibly, unless someone presents a compelling counter-narrative about why her decisions have actually improved things here. I've been here 2 weeks. I can't prove anything yet. Then prove intent, prove methodology, prove that her judgment was sound even if the results aren't visible yet. Kane paused. Or don't. Let her fight her own battles. That's also an option. Is it? Not really. Because if Vaughn wins and Vanessa gets removed, your job disappears with her. New leadership means new priorities. And I guarantee Vaughn's priorities don't include employing former janitors in executive positions. After Kane hung up, Ethan stood in the parking garage, surrounded by concrete and car exhaust, trying to decide how much he owed the woman who'd destroyed him publicly before rebuilding him. The answer should have been nothing. Should have been that Vanessa's problems were Vanessa's responsibility, that he'd done his job by accepting her offer and implementing security improvements. But the answer wasn't nothing. Because she'd admitted she was wrong. Because she'd given him authority and trusted his expertise. Because when he'd needed flexibility for Lily, she'd made it happen without hesitation. He pulled out his phone, sent a text to Vanessa. "We need to talk about tomorrow's board meeting." Her response came immediately. "I was hoping you hadn't heard about that." "I heard, and I think I can help. You don't have to. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when Vaughn decided to use my hiring as evidence against you. Tomorrow, 1 p.m., your office." He spent the rest of Thursday and most of Friday morning preparing something he never thought he'd create again, a tactical briefing. Not for military operations this time, but for corporate warfare. He analyzed Vaughn's likely arguments, identified weaknesses in each one, constructed counter-narratives that reframed every criticism as evidence of forward-thinking leadership. At 1 p.m. Friday, he walked into Vanessa's office carrying a tablet and enough documentation to wage a systematic defense of every decision she'd made. She looked exhausted. "You didn't have to do this." "Yeah, I did, because if Vaughn wins, I lose my job. But more than that, he'll use your removal as proof that compassionate leadership doesn't work. That admitting mistakes is weakness. That people like me don't belong in positions where we might actually change things." Those are pretty high stakes for a corporate power struggle. All power struggles have high stakes for someone. Ethan set his tablet on the conference table. "Here's what we're going to do. Vaughn's going to argue that hiring me was evidence of poor judgment, that you let emotion override business sense. We're going to prove that hiring me was the smartest decision you've made since taking over." For the next hour, they built a presentation that transformed Ethan's hiring from a liability into a strategic advantage. They documented security vulnerabilities he'd identified, cost savings from improved protocols, risk reduction from better staff training. They compiled testimonials from employees who felt safer with new procedures in place. They pulled together every piece of evidence that demonstrated measurable improvement. At 2 p.m., they walked into the boardroom together. Richard Vaughn sat at the head of the table, 62 years old, silver hair styled like expensive armor, suit that probably cost more than Ethan's car. 8 other board members flanked him, all of them wearing expressions that ranged from sympathetic to predatory. Vaughn's eyes landed on Ethan with barely concealed disdain. "Ms. Carter, you were told this was a closed board session. Mr. Brooks is my director of security. He's here to present relevant information. The board doesn't need presentations from staff members. The board needs accurate information before making decisions that could damage this company." Vanessa took her seat, gestured for Ethan to set up the projection equipment. "You've called for a vote of no confidence. I'm exercising my right to respond." Vaughn's jaw tightened, but he nodded to the other board members. "Proceed." Ethan connected his tablet to the projector, pulled up the first slide. 2 weeks ago, your security infrastructure had 16 critical vulnerabilities in the parking garage alone. 43 blind spots across all properties, emergency response protocols that hadn't been updated in 8 years. I've identified and begun addressing every single failure point. He walked them through the analysis. Specific, detailed, undeniable. Showed them camera placements that left expensive cars vulnerable to theft. Access points that could be exploited by anyone with basic social engineering skills. Staff training gaps that created liability risks the hotel's insurance probably didn't even know about. These vulnerabilities existed because nobody was looking for them, Ethan continued. The previous security director followed existing protocols without questioning whether those protocols were sufficient. I'm questioning everything. And in 2 weeks, I've already prevented 3 potential incidents that could have cost this company millions in liability. One of the board members leaned forward. "What kind of incidents?" "Theft attempt in the executive parking level, caught on new cameras we installed. unauthorized access to restricted areas, flagged by new badge tracking protocols, and a potentially violent situation on the 8th floor that was resolved without police intervention or media coverage. He brought up news articles about the hostage situation, then showed them what hadn't been reported: Tom Keller's military background, the potential for catastrophic violence, the fact that Ethan's intervention had kept it from escalating into a national news disaster. Ms. Carter hired me because she recognized that this hotel's security was inadequate, Ethan said. That recognition required admitting previous leadership, including her own, had failed to address serious problems. That's not weakness. That's the kind of honest assessment that prevents companies from discovering their vulnerabilities through disasters instead of audits. Vaughn cleared his throat. Mr. Brooks, your military service is commendable, but hiring a janitor with no corporate security experience to run a multi-million-dollar operation is exactly the kind of emotional decision-making that concerns this board. I had no corporate experience, Ethan agreed, but I had years of identifying and neutralizing threats in environments where mistakes got people killed. Corporate security is easier, the stakes are lower, and the opponents are less competent. But the methodology is identical. Find the vulnerabilities before someone else exploits them. And your compensation? $90,000 plus benefits for someone who was making minimum wage 2 weeks ago? That's fiscally irresponsible. That's market rate for someone with my skill set. If you hired a corporate security consultant to audit your properties, they'd charge twice what you're paying me and take 3 times as long to deliver half the results. Another board member spoke up. Mr. Brooks, the video of your dramatic recruitment has been viewed 6 million times. The publicity has been complicated for our brand. How do you respond to concerns that you're a liability? Ethan had been expecting this question. The publicity revealed something this board apparently didn't know, that you employed a veteran at minimum wage doing work he was overqualified for and fired him for trying to do that job better. That's not my liability. That's yours. I just happened to be the one who made it visible. The room went very quiet. Vaughn's expression had gone rigid. The real question, Ethan continued, is whether you want leadership that hides problems until they explode, or leadership that identifies and addresses problems before they become crises. Ms. Carter chose the second option. If that's grounds for removal, then you're telling every employee here that honesty is punished and image management is rewarded. He closed his presentation, stepped back. That's all I have. Vanessa stood. Richard, you've made your concerns clear. The board has heard them. Now I'd like to hear what my actual performance indicates versus what your personal opinions suggest. Vaughn's face had gone slightly red. This isn't personal, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like an old guard trying to maintain control by removing leadership that threatens your comfort. My mother ran this company through fear and absolute authority. I'm trying something different, and you can't accept that because it challenges everything you think leadership should look like. Your mother built this company. My mother built a company where employees were terrified to report problems, where innovation was punished, and where loyalty mattered more than competence. Vanessa's voice had gone steel hard. I loved her, but I'm not her. And I'm not going to run this company the way she did just because it makes you comfortable. The boardroom erupted into crosstalk, some members defending Vaughn, others pushing back, everyone talking over each other. Ethan stood against the wall, watching corporate warfare unfold with the same dynamics as military conflicts. Territory, power, the inability to admit that maybe the old ways weren't working anymore. Finally, the board called for a vote. Ethan watched hands raise, watched the count tilt back and forth. When it finished, Vanessa had survived by a single vote. Vaughn stood immediately. This isn't over. You've bought yourself time, but this company deserves better leadership than experiments in compassion. Then I guess I'll have to prove you wrong. Vanessa didn't back down. And Richard, if you're going to come after me again, bring better evidence, because Mr. Brooks just demonstrated that facts matter more than your opinions. After the board filed out, Vanessa collapsed into her chair, looking like she'd just survived combat. That was closer than I expected, she said quietly. One vote isn't a mandate. It's a warning. I know. She looked up at him. Thank you. For the presentation, for standing up there and defending decisions I made. I defended facts. The decisions just happened to be yours. Still, you didn't have to. She smiled slightly. Shadow Wolf rides again? Don't call me that. Sorry, force of habit. She stood, straightened her suit. I need to go do damage control with the board members who voted against me. But Ethan, whatever happens from here, I'm glad I hired you, even if it costs me everything. It won't, because we're going to make sure every security improvement gets documented, every vulnerability we fix gets reported, and every success story gets shared with people who matter. Vaughn wants evidence? We'll bury him in evidence. After he left Vanessa's office, Ethan checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Lily's school. His stomach dropped. He called back immediately. The school nurse answered. Mr. Brooks, Lily's fine, but she had a dizzy spell during recess. We've got her resting in the nurse's office. I'm on my way. He was at the school in 11 minutes, breaking speed limits and praying he wouldn't get pulled over. Lily was sitting on the nurse's cot, pale but conscious, looking small and scared. Daddy. She reached for him. Ethan pulled her into his arms, checking her over the way he'd done 1,000 times. Pulse, temperature, responsiveness. What happened, sweetheart? I was just playing and then everything got spinny. Mrs. Henderson brought me here. The nurse stepped closer. Her blood pressure was slightly low, but it's stabilizing, probably just dehydration. But given her medical history, I thought you should know. Thank you. Ethan kept holding Lily. We're going to see Dr. Reyna, right now. In the car, Lily leaned against him. I'm sorry I scared you. You didn't do anything wrong. Your body just needed a break. Are we still having pizza tonight? Yeah, we're still having pizza. At Dr. Reyna's office, they ran tests that took 2 hours and confirmed what the nurse had suspected. Dehydration, low blood sugar, nothing immediately dangerous but worth monitoring. The doctor prescribed rest, better hydration, and a follow-up appointment next week. Driving home, Ethan's hands were still shaking, because for 2 hours he'd been back in that place where his daughter's health was a crisis he couldn't control, where money and jobs and security protocols didn't matter compared to making sure she was okay. That night, they had pizza. Lily's appetite was back, color returning to her face. They watched cooking shows and she fell asleep on the couch halfway through an episode about making elaborate desserts. Ethan carried her to bed, tucked her in, sat there watching her breathe. His phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Board member who cast the deciding vote just told me Vaughn's planning another challenge in 3 months. We need to be ready. Ethan typed back. We will be. Because ready was the only option left. Ready meant finishing the security audit. Ready meant documenting every improvement. Ready meant proving that compassionate leadership could coexist with operational excellence. Ready meant accepting that invisible wasn't working anymore. And visible meant fighting battles on fronts he'd spent 3 years trying to avoid. But his daughter was safe, and that was enough. For now, it had to be enough. 3 months passed like water through fingers, simultaneously too fast and agonizingly slow. Ethan documented every security improvement with the precision of someone building a legal defense. Every camera installed, every protocol updated, every staff training session completed went into reports that read like evidence for a trial that hadn't started yet, but everyone knew was coming. Vaughn was planning something. Everyone could feel it. Board members whispered in corners during hotel events. Vanessa's assistant reported unusual meeting requests. The company's legal team started asking questions about personnel files and hiring procedures that felt too specific to be routine. But Lily's health had stabilized, and that mattered more than corporate warfare. Her follow-up appointments showed consistent improvement. The medication was working. She'd gained weight, her energy had returned, and she'd started asking about joining the after-school art program permanently instead of just occasionally. On a Tuesday in early March, Ethan was reviewing incident reports in his office, a converted storage room on the 3rd floor that smelled faintly of cleaning supplies, when his phone rang, Colonel Kane's number. I'm retired, he answered. Whatever you're calling about, the answer is still no. Good morning to you too, Kane sounded amused. I'm not calling for a mission. I'm calling because you're being honored. What? The Department of Defense is recognizing the hostage rescue operation publicly. Press conference next week in D.C. They want you there.
along with the tactical team and the families you helped save. Ethan set down his pen. I consulted. I didn't execute anything. Your strategy saved 14 lives. That's worth recognition. Recognition from the military is the last thing I need.
I'm trying to build a civilian life. Then think of it as closure. Those 3 kids you kept thinking about, their parents want to meet you. Thank you personally. You can say no, but they flew in specifically hoping you'd be there. Ethan closed his eyes, seeing Lily's face when she'd asked if helping people was important. Hearing her 8-year-old wisdom about everyone's kid being someone's whole world. When's the press conference? Thursday, 10 a.m. I'll send you the details. After Kane hung up, Ethan sat in his converted storage closet office, trying to figure out how attending a military ceremony fit into the life he'd been building. The answer was, it didn't. It was a detour into the past, a reminder of who he'd been instead of who he was trying to become. But those families deserved to see the face of someone who'd helped bring their people home, and maybe he deserved to see that his decisions had mattered beyond just tactical execution. He found Vanessa in her office, reviewing quarterly reports that apparently required her to look stressed, even when numbers were good. I need Thursday off, he said without preamble. She looked up. Everything okay? The military is doing a recognition ceremony for the hostage rescue. They want me in D.C. That's wonderful. Of course you can go. It's going to be public, more videos online, more articles about the janitor who became whatever story they're telling now. Vanessa set down her reports. And you're worried it'll give Vaughn more ammunition. I'm worried it'll make me look like I'm trading on military service instead of doing actual work here. Let him try that angle. You've documented 3 months of measurable improvements. Your work speaks for itself. She smiled slightly. Besides, if he attacks you for being publicly honored, he'll look like exactly what he is, someone who resents competence he didn't approve. Thursday morning, Ethan flew to D.C. on a ticket the military had paid for, wearing a suit that Vanessa had insisted the hotel cover as a business expense. Lily had wanted to come, but he'd told her it was boring adult stuff. The truth was, he didn't want her seeing him get pulled back into military identity when he was trying so hard to be just her father. The Pentagon building looked exactly as he remembered, imposing, bureaucratic, designed to make visitors feel small. Kane met him at security, looking official in her dress uniform. You clean up decent, she said by way of greeting. I'm here because you guilt-tripped me. Effective strategy. She led him through corridors that all looked identical. Polished floors, fluorescent lights, people in uniform moving with purpose. The families are already here. They're nervous about meeting you. Why would they be nervous? Because you're Shadow Wolf. You're famous to them. I'm nobody. I just pointed at a ceiling and suggested a different approach. Kane stopped walking, turned to face him. Ethan, for once in your life, accept that you did something meaningful. You don't have to be humble about everything. Sometimes you can just be proud. They entered a conference room where approximately 20 people were waiting. The rescued hostages, their families, the tactical team that had executed the operation, various military officials whose ranks Ethan didn't bother processing. At the front of the room, 3 children sat with their parents, and when they saw him enter, one of them, a girl maybe 6 years old, whispered something to her mother. The mother stood, approached Ethan with tears already forming. Master Sergeant Brooks? Just Ethan. I'm Jennifer Harlow. This is my daughter Emma. She was one of the hostages. The woman's voice broke. I don't know how to thank you for bringing her home. Ethan looked at Emma, small, dark-haired, clutching a stuffed elephant, and saw Lily in every feature. Saw his daughter's face if positions had been reversed, if he'd been the parent waiting for soldiers to rescue someone who meant everything. You don't need to thank me, he said quietly. I'm just glad she's safe. Other families approached, offering similar gratitude that Ethan didn't know how to accept. A father whose wife had been rescued. A teenager whose parents had survived. Each one carrying relief and trauma in equal measure, trying to express something language wasn't really equipped to handle. The press conference itself was carefully orchestrated. Major General Cross giving the official briefing, tactical team members receiving commendations, families positioned where cameras could capture emotion without exploiting it. Ethan stood off to the side, trying to be invisible the way he'd spent 3 years perfecting.
but Cross called him forward anyway.
Master Sergeant Ethan Brooks, whose strategic analysis provided the tactical framework that made this operation possible. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Ethan stood there feeling exposed in ways combat had never managed, wishing he was anywhere else. After the ceremony, Emma's mother found him again. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you have kids?" The question hit unexpectedly hard. "A daughter. She's 8. Then you understand what it means to get your child back when you thought you might lose them forever." Jennifer's eyes were wet. "Emma talks about the soldiers who rescued her, but she doesn't know about you. About someone sitting in a room looking at maps and finding the one way through that wouldn't get her killed." "That's okay. She doesn't need to know. But I need to. I need to know that someone cared enough to find the answer when easier options would have gotten her hurt. So thank you." From one parent to another. "Thank you for seeing my daughter as someone worth the extra effort." After Jennifer walked away, Kane appeared beside him. "You okay?" "No." "Didn't think so." She handed him a folder. "Service record request came through channels. Someone's digging into your military background. Thought you should know." Ethan opened the folder, scanned the request form. It had been filed by a law firm representing the Crown Meridian Hotel chain's board of directors. Specifically, filed on behalf of Richard Vaughn. "He's looking for disqualifying information," Ethan said flatly. "Trying to prove Vanessa's judgment was compromised." "Probably. But your record is clean. Decorated service, honorable discharge, nothing that would justify removal." "He doesn't need justified. He just needs enough doubt to swing board votes." Kane took back the folder. "Then you make sure there's no doubt. You keep doing the work, documenting the results, and proving that hiring you was the smartest decision she made. That's how you fight this." The flight back to the city gave Ethan too much time to think. About Emma Harlow and how easily she could have been Lily. About Jennifer's tears and whether his own tears had looked the same when his wife died, and he'd realized his daughter would grow up with only one parent. About the fact that trying to be invisible hadn't protected him from anything. It had just delayed the inevitable moment when he'd have to decide who he actually was. He landed at 8 p.m., drove straight to Mrs. Chen's apartment to pick up Lily, who'd spent the day there watching cartoons and eating snacks that probably ruined her dinner appetite. "Daddy?" She launched herself at him the moment Mrs. Chen opened the door. "How was your boring adult thing?" "Extremely boring. Tell me about your day." On the drive home, Lily chattered about a project in art class, about Tommy Bradshaw's latest catastrophe involving spilled paint, about how Mrs. Henderson had said Lily's color choices showed emotional maturity, which Lily thought sounded made up, but was probably a compliment. "Can we have pancakes tomorrow?" she asked as they pulled into the apartment complex. "It's Wednesday tomorrow. Pancakes are a weekend thing." "But you were gone all day and I missed you, and pancakes would make it better." Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Pancakes it is." That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat on the couch reviewing security reports that needed his signature. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Vaughn requested a special board meeting, 2 weeks from today. He's making his move. Ethan stared at the message, then called her directly. She answered immediately. "I know what you're going to say." "Do you?" "That I should have seen this coming. That I was naive to think 3 months would be enough to prove myself. That Vaughn was always going to find an angle. Actually, I was going to say we've got 2 weeks to build a case, so airtight he'll choke on his own arguments." Vanessa laughed, but it sounded exhausted. "You're optimistic for someone whose job is about to be eliminated." "I'm pragmatic, and pragmatism says we've got documentation, results, and the fact that every metric that matters has improved since I started. Vaughn can question your judgment all he wants, but he can't argue with numbers." "He's digging into your military record." "Kane warned you?" "Yeah. If he finds something, he won't, because there's nothing to find. I did my job, I did it well, and I left honorably. End of story." "Ethan," Vanessa's voice had gone quiet. "If this costs you your position, I'm sorry, you didn't ask for any of this. Neither did you. But we're both here now, so we might as well fight." The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in preparation for corporate warfare. Ethan compiled every security incident prevented, every cost saving generated, Every staff training session completed. He pulled together testimonials from employees who felt safer with new protocols. He documented response times, equipment upgrades, risk assessments that had identified vulnerabilities before they became disasters. Vanessa worked parallel tracks, gathering financial data that proved the hotel's performance had improved across multiple metrics since she'd taken over. Occupancy rates up. Employee retention improved. Customer satisfaction scores rising. Every number that could be quantified showing movement in the right direction. They met daily in her office, building presentations like they were planning a military campaign, which, in a way, they were. On the Friday before the board meeting, Ethan picked up Lily from school and took her to the park. She'd been asking for weeks, and he'd been putting it off because work was consuming everything. But watching her run toward the swings, backpack bouncing, reminded him that work was only worth doing if it enabled moments like this. "Daddy, push me!" Lily was already climbing onto a swing, kicking her legs impatiently. Ethan pushed, watching her arc higher, her laughter cutting through the afternoon air. Normal kid doing normal kid things, completely unaware that her father was about to walk into a boardroom fight that would determine whether they kept their current life or started over again. "Higher," Lily shouted. "Any higher and you'll achieve orbit." "That's not even possible. Mrs. Henderson says orbit requires specific velocity calculations." Mrs. Henderson sounds like she's teaching physics in art class. After the park, they got ice cream from a truck that probably violated multiple health codes but served the kind of soft serve that tasted like childhood summers. They sat on a bench, eating too fast and getting brain freeze, while the sun set behind buildings that blocked most of the good light. "Daddy, can I ask you something serious?" Lily's voice had gone quiet. "Always." "Are we going to have to move again?" The question landed like a punch. "Why would you think that?" "Because you have your worried face, the one where you're thinking about money or jobs or things you don't want to tell me about. And last time you had that face a lot, we moved." Ethan set down his ice cream. "We're not moving, I promise." "But something's wrong. Something's complicated. There's a difference." "What's complicated?" He tried to find words an 8-year-old could understand that wouldn't scare her. "Remember how I got a new job at the hotel? Well, some people think I shouldn't have that job, so they're trying to change things. But I'm working very hard to show them they're wrong." "Are you going to win?" "I don't know, but I'm going to try." Lily finished her ice cream, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand in a way that completely defeated the purpose of napkins. Mrs. Henderson says trying is what matters, that results are just what happens after trying. Mrs. Henderson is very wise. She is, but I think you're going to win anyway, because you're really good at stuff. The confidence in her voice, absolute, unquestioning, made something crack in Ethan's chest. She believed in him the way kids believe in their parents before life teaches them that adults are just people making it up as they go. Monday morning arrived with weather that matched the mood. Gray, drizzling, the kind of rain that wasn't heavy enough to justify an umbrella, but was persistent enough to soak you anyway. Ethan dressed in his best suit, the one Vanessa had insisted the hotel pay for, and tried not to feel like he was preparing for a funeral. At the apartment, Lily was already dressed for school, eating cereal at their small table. "Big day?" she asked. "Yeah. You look fancy." "I have an important meeting." "With the people who think you shouldn't have your job?" "Yeah," she nodded seriously. "Then you should tell them about all the good stuff you've done, like how you made the parking garage safer and fixed the cameras and helped that man who was scared." "That's exactly what I'm planning to do." "Good." She returned to her cereal. "Can we still have spaghetti tonight?" "We can have whatever you want." The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. Ethan spent the morning doing final preparations, reviewing documents, running through arguments until he'd memorized every statistic that mattered. At 1:30, he walked into the boardroom where Vanessa was already waiting, looking calm in a way that had to be performed. "Ready?" she asked. "No, but we're doing this anyway." Board members filed in over the next 15 minutes. Vaughn arrived last, flanked by 2 people Ethan didn't recognize, probably lawyers or consultants hired specifically for this ambush. The older man's expression was satisfied, like someone who'd already counted votes and knew the outcome. Ms. Carter, Vaughn took his seat at the head of the table. Thank you for accommodating this special session. We have significant concerns about operational decisions that require board oversight. I'm aware of your concerns, Richard. Ethan and I are prepared to address them. I'm sure you are. Vaughn pulled out his own tablet. However, the board has received information that requires immediate attention, specifically regarding Mr. Brooks's military service and the circumstances surrounding his discharge. Ethan's stomach dropped. Kane had said his record was clean. What had Vaughn found? Vaughn pulled up a document on the projection screen. According to recently obtained records, Master Sergeant Brooks was involved in an operation that resulted in civilian casualties. 3 confirmed deaths during a reconnaissance mission that was later classified due to diplomatic complications. The room went silent. Every board member was staring at Ethan. That operation was cleared by investigation, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. The casualties were the result of enemy action, not anything my team did. The investigation found no fault. That's different from finding you blameless. Vaughn's smile was predatory. The point is, Ms. Carter hired someone with a complicated military history to run security for our properties without conducting proper background investigation. That's irresponsible at best, negligent at worst. Vanessa stood up. Richard, you're deliberately misrepresenting facts to support a predetermined conclusion. The operation Ethan was involved in was investigated thoroughly by military authorities. He was cleared of any wrongdoing, and his service record since then shows someone who left abruptly after his wife died, who walked away from military career prospects to work minimum wage jobs under a false identity. I didn't use a false identity, Ethan said quietly. I used my legal name and lived my life. That's not deception. That's privacy. You hid your military background from employers. I disclosed it when asked. Nobody asked. Nobody cared enough to ask. Vaughn shifted tactics, pulling up more documents. Let's talk about your hiring process, Ms. Carter. Did you conduct reference checks, employment verification, standard corporate due diligence? I reviewed Ethan's qualifications and determined he was the right candidate. Based on what? A viral video and your emotional response to public criticism? Based on 3 years of watching him work harder than anyone else in this building, based on recognizing competence when I saw it. Vanessa's voice had gone hard. And based on the fact that in 3 months, he's done more to improve our security infrastructure than the previous director accomplished in 5 years. Improved according to whose metrics? Mine. Ethan stood up, pulling out his own tablet. Let me show you whose metrics. For the next 45 minutes, Ethan walked the board through every security improvement he'd implemented. Every camera installed, every blind spot eliminated, every protocol updated. He showed them incident response times cut by 60%, insurance liability risk reduced by 42%, staff training completion rates up to 97% from previous 63%. He showed them the parking garage theft that had been prevented because of new camera coverage, the unauthorized access attempt that was caught by updated badge protocols, the hostage situation that was resolved without police intervention or media coverage because someone had been there who understood tactical de-escalation. These aren't theoretical improvements, Ethan said. These are measurable results that directly impact your bottom line. Your insurance premiums are going down because your risk profile improved. Your liability exposure decreased because protocols actually work now. And your employees feel safer, which shows up in retention rates and performance metrics. He pulled up comparison data showing Crown Meridian's security performance against competitor hotels. You're now industry-leading in 8 out of 10 security categories. You were bottom quartile when I started. That's not emotional decision-making. That's strategic hiring that delivered measurable value. Vaughn was looking less satisfied now. Mr. Brooks, these improvements could have been implemented by any qualified security professional. Could have been. Weren't. Because qualified security professionals follow industry standards, which are inadequate. I questioned the standards and built something better. And you think that justifies Ms. Carter's failure to follow proper hiring procedures? I think results justify decisions, and the results speak for themselves. One of the board members who'd been silent spoke up. Mr. Brooks,
The operation Richard mentioned, the one with civilian casualties. Can you tell us what actually happened? Ethan had been dreading this question. It was a reconnaissance mission. We were observing enemy positions when they detected us. During the firefight that followed, 3 civilians were caught in crossfire. All 3 were killed by enemy action, not our team. But we were there. We engaged the situation, and 3 people died. How do you live with that? The question was asked without judgment, just curiosity. Ethan met the board member's eyes. Badly. I live with it badly. I think about those 3 people constantly. I wonder if there was something different I could have done, some way I could have prevented it. And I don't have good answers. He paused. But I also know that running away from responsibility doesn't help anyone. So I try to use what I learned about identifying threats, about planning for contingencies, about assuming nothing will go smoothly to prevent other people from dying unnecessarily. Is that why you took this job? Redemption? No, I took this job because I need to support my daughter, but redemption would be nice too. The room was quiet. Vaughn looked like he was trying to find another angle of attack, but coming up empty. Finally, the board member who'd asked the question nodded. I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Brooks, and I appreciate the work you've documented. Richard, I don't think Mr. Brooks' hiring represents negligence. I think it represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking we should encourage. Other board members murmured agreement. The tide had shifted, and Vaughn could see it happening. This board is supposed to provide oversight, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. Not rubber-stamp decisions because they produce short-term results. These aren't short-term results, Vanessa said. These are systematic improvements that will benefit this company for years. And yes, I made the decision quickly, because I recognized someone who could help us, and I didn't want to lose him to bureaucratic delays. That's not how proper corporate governance works. Then maybe proper corporate governance needs to change. Vanessa looked around the table. My mother ran this company through rigid hierarchy and fear-based management. It worked for her generation. But employees today want leadership that values their contributions, that recognizes talent regardless of where it comes from, that admits mistakes and learns from them. That's what I'm trying to build. And if this board thinks that's disqualifying, then maybe I'm not the right person to lead this company. The silence that followed was heavy. Then one board member started clapping. Slowly, others joined in. Not enthusiastic applause, more like acknowledgement that something important had been said. Vaughn stood abruptly. This is a mistake. You're all making a mistake. Then we'll learn from it, Vanessa said calmly. That's what leadership means. The vote when it came was 8-2 in Vanessa's favor. Vaughn and one other board member voted against her. Everyone else voted to table the no-confidence measure and continue supporting her leadership. After the meeting dispersed, after board members filed out offering various levels of support or concern, after Vaughn left without speaking to anyone, Ethan and Vanessa stood alone in the boardroom. We won, Vanessa said quietly. You won. I just provided documentation. Don't do that. Don't minimize what just happened. She turned to face him. You stood in front of people who wanted to destroy you and defended yourself with facts and honesty. That's not small. It's also not over. Vaughn's going to try again. Let him. Next time we'll have even more evidence. Ethan gathered his materials, exhaustion hitting like a physical weight. I need to go pick up my daughter. Of course. And Ethan, thank you for fighting, for staying, for believing this was worth defending. He left without responding, because he didn't have words for what the past few weeks had cost, or what today's victory meant. He just knew he was tired and Lily was waiting and spaghetti needed to be made. At the school, Lily ran to the car with her usual explosive energy. Did you win? Yeah, we won. I knew you would. You're really good at stuff. She climbed into the passenger seat. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? We're having spaghetti for dinner. Ice cream first, then spaghetti, because celebrating is important. They got ice cream. They made spaghetti. They ate while watching cooking shows, and Lily narrated what the chefs were doing wrong, which was apparently everything. After dinner, after homework, after the slow ritual of bedtime stories and teeth brushing and tucking in, Ethan sat on the couch in the silence of his apartment and tried to process everything that had happened. His phone buzzed. A text from Kane. Heard you survived the board meeting. Proud of you. Then one from Vanessa. The hotel is hosting a gala next month. Corporate partners, major donors, board members. I'd like you there. Not as security, as my colleague. Ethan stared at the message, trying to imagine himself at a gala, making small talk with wealthy people, pretending he belonged in spaces designed to exclude people like him. He typed back, I'll be there. Because belonging wasn't about deserving. It was about showing up and refusing to be invisible anymore. The gala happened on a Saturday in early April. Ethan wore a tuxedo that felt like costume, stood in the Crown Meridian's grand ballroom surrounded by people whose watches cost more than his car, and tried not to feel like an imposter. Lily had wanted to come, but he'd told her it was boring adult stuff, which was partially true, but mostly he needed her safe at home with Mrs. Chen, away from corporate politics and social performance. Vanessa found him near the bar, looking elegant in a dress that probably required architectural engineering to achieve its effect. You came. I said I would. You look uncomfortable. I am uncomfortable. These people all know who I am, and they're all wondering why I'm here. Then let's give them a reason to wonder harder. She grabbed his arm, led him toward a small stage at the front of the ballroom. I'm giving a speech. You're part of it. Vanessa. Trust me. The ballroom quieted as Vanessa took the microphone. She thanked donors, acknowledged board members, mentioned corporate partnerships in the bland language that made wealthy people feel appreciated. Then her tone shifted. 3 months ago, I made a decision that some people questioned. I hired a man who'd worked as a janitor in this hotel to be our director of security. People said I was being emotional, that I was making decisions based on guilt rather than qualifications, that I was risking this company's reputation on someone unproven. She gestured toward Ethan. This is the man they were talking about, Ethan Brooks, who spent 3 years cleaning floors in this building while supporting his daughter alone, who researched marble composition because he cared about doing his job well, even when nobody noticed, who walked away from military service because being a father mattered more than being a soldier. The ballroom was silent, every eye on them. In 3 months, Ethan has transformed our security infrastructure. He's prevented incidents that would have cost us millions. He's trained staff to respond to crises with competence instead of panic. He's proven that talent exists in places we're trained not to look. And he's taught me that leadership isn't about maintaining comfort. It's about recognizing value regardless of where it comes from. Vanessa smiled. So to everyone who questioned that decision, you were right to question. Good leadership should be questioned, but you were wrong about Ethan. And I'm glad I ignored your concerns and trusted my judgment, because sometimes the best decisions are the ones that make comfortable people uncomfortable. The applause started slowly, then built. Ethan stood there, feeling exposed and validated simultaneously, trying to figure out what expression his face should make. After the speech, after the formal dinner, after hours of making small talk with people who wanted to hear war stories he wouldn't tell, Ethan escaped to the hotel's roof terrace. The city sprawled below, lights reflecting off glass buildings, traffic moving in organized chaos. He heard footsteps behind him. Vanessa joined him at the railing. That speech wasn't subtle, he said. Subtlety is overrated. Vaughn needed to know I'm not backing down. You made me sound like a hero. You are a hero. You just don't like admitting it. I'm a guy who got lucky. Right place, right skills, right timing. That's not luck. That's preparation meeting opportunity. She looked out at the city. My mother would have hated what I did tonight. She'd say I was being weak, that admitting uncertainty undermines authority, that leaders should never apologize. Do you think she was right? I think she was successful, but I also think success isn't the same as correctness. Vanessa turned to face him. I don't want to run this company the way she did. I want to build something better, something that values people instead of just extracting value from them. That's a nice goal, but boards care about profits. Profits come from people. Happy employees provide better service. Better service attracts better clients. Better clients generate better revenue. It's not complicated. It's also not guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed, but trying is still worth it. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe below them. After a while, Ethan checked his phone. I should go. Lily's probably still awake, interrogating Mrs. Chen about whether I actually went to a fancy party or just lied about having friends. Does she worry about you? All the time. Kids are perceptive in ways that make lying impossible. Bring her to the hotel sometime. Let her see where you work. It might help her worry less. Or worry more when she sees how many things can go wrong. Optimism really isn't your default setting, is it? Realism. Optimism is just realism for people who haven't been disappointed enough yet. Ethan left the gala, drove home through streets that had emptied as night deepened. Mrs. Chen reported that Lily had indeed interrogated her about the party, had fallen asleep around 9, and had made Mrs. Chen promise to save her some of the cookies she'd baked. In the apartment, Ethan checked on Lily, sleeping peacefully, one leg hanging off the bed, stuffed rabbit clutched under her arm. He fixed her position, pulled the blanket up properly, stood there watching her breathe. This was why. Not the job, not the recognition, not the gala speeches or board victories. Just this. His daughter safe, his daughter sleeping, his daughter dreaming about things 8-year-olds dream about. The next morning, Lily woke him by jumping on the couch. "Daddy, Mrs. Chen said you went to a fancy party. Was it fancy?" "Very fancy." "Did you eat fancy food?" "The fanciest, tiny portions on huge plates." "That sounds stupid." "It kind of was." "Did people wear fancy clothes?" "Everyone wore tuxedos and dresses that probably cost more than our rent." "Did you feel fancy?" Ethan looked at his daughter's face, eager, curious, completely unimpressed by wealth she'd never experienced. "Not even a little bit." "Good, because you're perfect regular." They made pancakes for breakfast, even though it was Sunday and pancakes were technically a Saturday thing. But rules were flexible when you'd survived corporate warfare and wanted to celebrate being exactly who you were instead of who other people expected.
At the table, Lily poured too much syrup on her pancakes, then looked guilty when she realized what she'd done. "It's fine," Ethan said. "Mistakes happen. But now they're too sweet. The next time you'll know to use less. That's how learning works." She nodded seriously, then started eating anyway because wasted pancakes were apparently worse than too sweet pancakes. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Always." "When I grow up, do I have to do fancy stuff like you did last night?" "Only if you want to. You can do whatever makes you happy." "What if what makes me happy is being an artist? Mrs. Henderson says artists don't usually go to fancy parties." "Then you'll be an artist who doesn't go to fancy parties. That's allowed." "But what if I can't make money being an artist?" "Then you'll figure out a different way. Or you'll be an artist who also does something else. Life doesn't have to be one thing." Lily considered this while chewing her too sweet pancakes. "Were you always a soldier?" "No, I was a lot of things before that, and a lot of things after." "Were you always my dad?" The question caught him off guard. "I've been your dad since you were born, but I wasn't always good at it. I had to learn." "You're good at it now." "I'm trying to be." That's what Mrs. Henderson says matters, trying. After breakfast, they went to the park. After the park, they got ice cream even though they'd just eaten pancakes because rules about nutrition were also flexible sometimes. After ice cream, they went home and Lily worked on art projects while Ethan caught up on security reports that needed reviewing. His phone buzzed. A text from Kane. "Heard about the gala speech. You're officially out of the invisible business." He typed back. "Wasn't planning to be visible. It just happened. Everything just happens with you. But you're doing good work. Keep it up." That evening, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat on the couch and thought about the past 4 months. About helicopters landing in hotel lobbies and board meetings that felt like combat and gala speeches that announced to the world that invisible didn't work anymore. He thought about Tom Keller, who'd needed someone to tell him he could walk away from disaster. About Emma Harlow, who'd gone home to her parents because someone had cared enough to find the one approach that wouldn't get her killed. About Lily, who believed her father was good at stuff and perfect, regular simultaneously. He thought about Vanessa, trying to build a company that valued people instead of extracting value from them. About whether that was actually possible or just idealism that would get crushed by shareholders who cared more about quarterly earnings than employee happiness. He thought about whether he'd made the right choices. Whether accepting this job had been survival or surrender. Whether visibility was worth the cost of constant exposure. And he decided that maybe the right choice wasn't about survival or surrender. Maybe it was about accepting that life didn't offer perfect options, just different kinds of hard, And you picked the hard that let you live with yourself. The hard that let you come home to your daughter every night. The hard that let you look at yourself in the mirror and see someone trying instead of someone hiding. The weeks that followed settled into routine that felt almost normal. Ethan continued improving security systems, training staff, preventing incidents before they became crises. Vanessa continued running the hotel with leadership that prioritized people over profit margins, even when board members questioned whether kindness was fiscally responsible. Lily continued being 8, asking impossible questions, creating art that defied perspective, believing her father was capable of fixing anything despite mounting evidence that adults were just people pretending they knew what they were doing. One afternoon in late April, Ethan was reviewing camera footage from the parking garage when Gerald Humphrey knocked on his office door. "Got a minute?" "Sure." Gerald entered, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to thank you for the security improvements. My daughter parks here when she visits, and knowing the garage is actually monitored makes me worry less." "That's the job." "It's more than that. It's caring enough to do the job right when it would be easier to just follow minimum standards." Gerald hesitated. "I've worked here 17 years. Your mother ran this place like efficiency mattered more than people. Vanessa's trying something different, and you're part of that difference. I just install cameras and write protocols." "No. You make people feel like their safety matters, that their concerns are valid, that someone's actually paying attention." Gerald extended his hand. "So thank you for that." After Gerald left, Ethan sat in his converted storage closet office, trying to process the idea that his work mattered to people beyond just preventing liability incidents. His phone buzzed, a text from Lily's school. "Lily won first place in the district art competition. Thought you'd want to know. Awards ceremony Friday at 2 p.m. Ethan stared at the message, something warm expanding in his chest. He texted back, "I'll be there." Then he texted Vanessa, "Need Friday afternoon off. Lily's got an awards ceremony." Her response came immediately. "Of course, tell her congratulations from me." Friday afternoon, Ethan sat in an elementary school auditorium that smelled like cafeteria food and childhood ambition. Parents filled the seats, phones ready to document their children's achievements. On stage, art projects from across the district were displayed, and Lily's ocean painting was centered in the winner's row. When they called her name, Lily walked up to receive her ribbon with a confidence Ethan hadn't seen before. Not the confidence of someone who expected to win, but the confidence of someone who'd created something she was proud of, regardless of whether other people validated it. She spotted him in the crowd, waved enthusiastically, almost dropped her ribbon. After the ceremony, in the parking lot, Lily was bouncing with energy. "Did you see? Did you see I won?" "I saw. I'm so proud of you." Mrs. Henderson says the judges liked my use of perspective and emotional depth, which I think means they liked that the stick figures looked happy. They definitely looked happy. Because I was painting us, at the beach, where we're going to go someday. She clutched her ribbon. "Can we celebrate with ice cream?" "We can celebrate with whatever you want." They got ice cream. They went to the park. They sat on a bench watching the sunset while Lily talked about her plans to be an artist, a doctor, an astronaut, and maybe a chef because cooking looked fun on TV. "Daddy?" She'd gone quiet, which usually meant serious questions were coming. "Yeah? Are you happy?" The question was so direct it took his breath away. "What makes you ask that?" "Because you smile more now, and you don't have your worried face as much. So I think maybe you're happy, but I wanted to make sure." Ethan looked at his daughter, 8 years old, holding an art competition ribbon, asking questions that should have been beyond her understanding. "I'm happy. Yeah. I think I'm actually happy." "Good. Because you deserve to be happy. Mrs. Henderson says everyone deserves happiness, even when life is hard." Mrs. Henderson is very wise. She is, but I think you're wise too, in a dad way. They stayed at the park until the sun disappeared behind buildings and streetlights started flickering on. Normal evening, normal city, normal father and daughter doing normal things. But normal felt different now. Normal felt earned instead of settled for. Normal felt like something worth protecting instead of something to hide behind. The next morning, Ethan woke to his phone ringing. Vanessa's number, calling at 7 a.m. "This better be important," he answered. "Vaughn resigned from the board, effective immediately." Ethan sat up. "What?" "Letter came through last night. No explanation, just resignation. He's done." "That doesn't make sense. He was planning another challenge." "Apparently he changed his mind. Or someone changed it for him." Vanessa sounded cautiously optimistic. "Either way, our biggest obstacle just removed himself." After she hung up, Ethan tried to process what had happened. Vaughn didn't seem like someone who gave up easily, which meant something had forced his hand. Later that day, Kane called with the answer. "Someone leaked Vaughn's financial records," she said without preamble. "Turns out he'd been embezzling from company accounts for years. Small amounts, carefully hidden, but enough to destroy him if it went public." "Who leaked it?" "No idea. But whoever did it saved you a lot of trouble." Ethan didn't ask more questions. Sometimes victories came from unexpected places, and questioning them was less important than accepting them. The months that followed were quietly transformative. Vanessa's leadership style started influencing other hotels in the chain. Employee retention improved. Customer satisfaction scores continued rising. The board that had once questioned her judgment started seeing her as someone who could actually grow the company instead of just maintaining it. Ethan's security improvements became industry standard, written up in hospitality journals, copied by competitor hotels who'd finally noticed that maybe caring about employee safety mattered. And Lily continued growing, creating art, asking impossible questions, believing her father was perfect regular and exactly who she needed him to be. On a Tuesday in June, Ethan was finishing paperwork when Vanessa knocked on his office door. "Got a minute?" "Always." She entered carrying a folder that looked official. "The board approved something. I wanted to tell you personally." "Approved what?" "A foundation for hotel employees facing medical hardships. Funded by the company, administered independently. It'll cover things like medication costs, treatment expenses, anything insurance doesn't handle." She set the folder on his desk. "We're calling it the Brooks Foundation, named after someone who knows what it's like to choose between rent and medicine." Ethan stared at the folder, something tight forming in his throat. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I wanted to. Because you were right. People shouldn't have to be invisible to survive. They shouldn't have to choose between their kids' medicine and their own dignity. And if this company can help prevent that, we should." "Vanessa, don't. Don't minimize it or deflect. Just accept that sometimes good things happen because someone decided to make them happen." She smiled. "You taught me that. Now let me teach it back to you." That night, Ethan told Lily about the foundation. She listened seriously, then asked, "Does that mean other kids won't have to worry about medicine like I did?" "Some of them? Yeah." "Good. Because worrying about medicine is scary, even when you try not to let your kids see you're worried." She climbed onto the couch beside him. "You were always worried, Daddy, even when you pretended you weren't." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just be less worried now because we're okay, right?" "Right, we're okay." She fell asleep against his shoulder while they watched cooking shows. Ethan sat there holding her, watching shadows shift across their small apartment, trying to remember when he'd last felt this kind of peace. The kind of peace that came from knowing your daughter was safe and healthy and dreaming about becoming an artist someday. The kind of peace that came from work that mattered instead of work that just paid bills. The kind of peace that came from accepting visibility instead of hiding from it. He thought about the past 6 months, the helicopter landing, the board meetings, the hostage situation, the gala speech. Every moment when he could have stayed invisible and chose visibility instead. He thought about Emma Harlow going home to her parents, about Tom Keller getting help instead of destroying himself, about employees who'd benefit from a foundation that existed because someone had decided their struggles mattered. He thought about Vanessa, learning to lead with compassion instead of fear, about Gerald, feeling less worried about his daughter's safety, about Kane, satisfied that her guilt trip had actually led somewhere good. And he thought about Lily, sleeping peacefully, believing her father was good at stuff and perfect regular, trusting that tomorrow would bring pancakes and art projects, and all the normal magic that made survival worthwhile. Life wasn't perfect. It probably never would be. But it was good. And good was enough. More than enough, actually. Good was everything. Because the greatest victory of Ethan Brooks's life wasn't on any battlefield overseas. It wasn't in any board meeting or security audit or public ceremony. It was right here. His daughter safe, his conscience clear, his future uncertain but no longer terrifying. It was coming home before dinner every single day and meaning it when he said he'd always be there. It was finally understanding that being someone's whole world didn't require being a hero. It just required showing up, trying hard, and refusing to disappear when things got difficult. It was accepting that sometimes the most important mission was the one nobody would ever write about. The daily mission of being present, being honest, and being enough for the people who needed you most. That was the mission that mattered. That was the mission worth fighting for. That was the only mission that had ever really counted. And for the first time in 3 years, maybe for the first time in his entire adult life, Ethan Brooks wasn't running from it anymore. He was finally home.